Okay, welcome to the meeting. As always, the first thing on the agenda is public comments from anyone who is signed up to speak. Do you have anyone?
Dwayne Herron.
Welcome.
Should I stand here or in front of the camera?
No,
Being that it's being
wherever
videotaped.
you're comfortable.
I come here tonight to start a new goal for myself this year, and that is better communication. So, the topic I want to discuss is driver's education. As we found out and went through, most of you know, this past summer, I ended up going elsewhere to teach driver's education, which was fine. However, through the course of the summer, I've learned a lot. And one of the things I did learn was I'm a hot commodity. The fact that the district that I taught in, before I left, are you willing to come back next year? August, after I was done with the program, phone calls from my house. You sent a resume and cover letter to us. We were okay this year, but are you available in summer of 2019? In all three of those situations, my response to them was, well, we'll have to wait and see. And the reason why I said we'll have to wait and see is because as I've worked here for 30 years as a dedicated professional, my primary responsibility is here, not somewhere else. I do not want to have the situation happen as it did last year where students come up to me and point the finger at me and say, we would have had driver's ed this summer if it wasn't for you going somewhere else. So I'm here tonight to communicate to you. I have had other offers. I said that my primary obligation is here to wait and see on your part. One administrator said, I appreciate that, I understand that. Could you let me know by February? So I said, I'll see what I can do. So I don't want to push the pressure on anybody. I don't want to put a timeline on anything. But if we are planning on offering the program next summer, I would please appreciate being notified so that I can notify the other parties involved of what my intentions will be, whether it be here, and I have to say, well, sorry, we're offering it in Canajoharie, so I'm going to choose to, supply the educational learning experience to the students of our own district that I'm full-time employed at. Or, well, they're not going to offer a program, so I have to make a decision, and I got to choose between you and you. And when I make that decision, two of them obviously going to lose out. They will have to post the position. And by posting the position, we'll have to hope we can find someone. One individual district says, we would really appreciate it because our person hired, we normally run it during the school year. We can't run it this year during the school year. We're going to have an overflow of students who need it. So that's why I'm here tonight, to basically say that. I'm not here to open a discussion, just here to let you know, being communicated with each and every one of you here. And I will do that in the future this year. From time to time, I see you pop in and we have a point of interest. If it's a point of discussion, I will meet with Ms. Grimshaw and Ms. Gleason, but if it's something that I just want to make everyone know about, I will show up at the board meeting, share my points of interest with you, so I'm a better communicating process between myself and each and every one of you here this evening. Okay? I'm going to put I kind of wrote a little summary of what we did or what I talked about. So I sent an email, but I made hard copies because I know the email's been a little trying as of late, so we get the bugs figured out. But yeah, why don't we do that? Take one down and pass it around. Okay? So appreciate your time, and look forward to maybe you let me know in a timely fashion so I can make the decision, and also I can let other interested parties know ahead of time so they know what they need to do also. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and we look forward to improving communication.
Yes.
Anyone else?
No.
The next one on the agenda is Mohawk Solar Project, and I don't know, we could use Joe Green. Okay, Joe, so you're on.
We're gonna tag team, Scott and
Okay.
I.
If you don't mind running that, that'd be great. Good evening, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to come here and give you an overview and answer your questions on Mohawk Solar.
That's Joe Green and you are.
Scott McDonald, there we go, thank you very much. So, a little bit of my background. I live locally here, well, Clifton Park, New York, and I've been in this business, renewable energy, since 1991. So, a lot of the projects that I've worked on have been in New York State. I don't know if you're familiar with the Maple Ridge project up in Lowville. That's one that I worked on. It's the largest wind facility east of the Mississippi. So, been doing this for quite a while. Solar is something that I moved from being really concentrated in wind. Now I am having fun in solar. So Mohawk Solar represents the first large project to go through the Article 10 process. If you're familiar with that, the Siting Board and Department of Public Service is running the permit process, and at the end of the day, they will provide a permit for the project. So all the really intensive environmental work and engagement, like we're doing here with the local communities and various boards, town boards, planning boards, zoning board of appeals. The towns are very much involved in this. So we look at one very important part of this process is getting out and public engagement. So what you'll be invited to is there will be an open house that we hope to have in the November timeframe. So that information and invitation will be going out to all of you. We hope that you take the opportunity, because what we're presenting here is going to be just a snapshot of the project, but what will be presented there will be very much in detail. Of course, you can always attend all the town board meetings and planning board meetings to get really into the nitty-gritty as well. So let's just start out there, Joe, if you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide. So the project is 90.5 megawatts. So about a quarter of that is split between 75% of the project is in Canajoharie, 25% is basically in Minton. So there are a number of project components. If you're unfamiliar with solar, we will actually have panels within the project that will be enclosed within a fence line. And all that design is being worked on right now. We're probably 95% done with the design. There's just some tweaking that's going on. We have landscaping work. Of course, the panels track the sun. They will tilt during the day to maximize the collection of energy. The panels will be set up, if you can kind of look and think of this as a row of panels. There will be an open grass area, and maybe another row of panels right here, so they will be separated. We'll have a visual, we'll show you a visual of that as well. So topography is a really important issue in the design, so we're looking for flat areas. The slope, if there is a slope, it has to be less than approximately 7 degrees. And if there is a slope, we like it to be facing south. So all of these are just design considerations. The panels themselves will be, it will be a foundation, sort of a pier, a fairly simple type installation. In fact, we could get this project constructed in about 6 to 8 months. So we'll be in and out fairly quickly in the whole scheme of things. We have from panels to panels, we have an underground electrical lines, so you won't have the overhead lines that you're used to. So everything will be like snaking underground from panel to panel, and then it will be an interconnect to St. Johnsville, Marshville, St. John's. Yep, here we go.
Can I just interrupt?
Sure.
You said you'd have piers. Is that cement piers that they'd be going into? Or?
It depends on right now there's a geotech survey going on, so the actual design of what that will be is going to be dependent on the final information that comes out of that analysis. It could be some encased in cement at the very bottom of the pier itself. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, so the bulk of the design is a driven pile, so similar to what you would see for like a guide rail along the highway. So that's what we're expecting mostly drive down about 10 feet down into the soil. We have some results back from the geotech study indicates that in some places we might have to do a different type of foundation. So there really only are three. It's the driven pile. Another is basically a screw anchor, just screw it into the soil. The third would be a driven pile with grout at the bottom. So where we hit bedrock, we would grout down into there, just down at the bottom where it actually meets the soil, the bedrock. That's usually about 13 feet. That's what we're seeing. So the nice thing about all of these panel foundations is that when we're finished, the whole idea with the project is that it's intended to be temporary in nature. It's going to be in here for multiple decades, but when it's done, you literally come in, remove the panels off the top of the racking system, remove the racking system, and then a machine will come in and grab that pile and shake it and pull it free. So even the ones that are grouted, so the screw ones, you just back the screw out and take it out. But the ones that are driven, you grab it, shake it. The one that's grouted, you grab it, shake it, it breaks the grout free down at the bottom, and then you pull it up, and that grout remains down 13 feet or 12 feet or whatever it might be. The idea, of course, is that with it being temporary in nature, we can remove this after a number of decades, and the land can immediately go back into farming. The advantage, of course, is that, underneath the panels, we have a really nice thick turf that we plan to reduce or minimize weeds. And so the soil is remaining untouched for decades. And then you pull all this off, and literally you can just plow it right up and go back into farming. So that's a real nice feature of solar, to be able to come in and go back out like that.
Good, thank you.
Can I ask a question that's associated with that? When do you also pull all the underground wiring out too?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. So the underground wiring is buried down 4 feet. We have in all of our leases with the landowners a removal clause in there where we would take all the components off as well as the buried cable. And we also actually would post financial security for that to make sure that the money's there. So we have decommissioning provisions in every lease. So our lease talks about removing it, but in the Article 10 process, the Department of Ag and Markets they have guidelines for solar panels, for solar farms. Their recommendation is certified as de-energized and leave it in place because you would do more damage to the land by removing it. So that's the plan right now. As we march through the Article 10 process, we will of course bring up that our leases talk about removal, but Ag and Markets, I suspect, is going to win out, and they're going to have us just certified as de-energized and leave it. But at 4 feet below the ground, that's no farmer is going to be hitting that, so it'll be safer than we continue to farm above it.
So at the end of the day, we're looking at, we have approximately 2,500 acres within the project area itself, but we'll be using, as far as the area that's being used for the panels themselves, is around 550, which is plus or minus 500 acres.
I'll jump in here quickly. So just to orient you where the project is, this red line on the outside is what's the definition of our facility area in the Article 10 process. Within that, that's that like 2,500 acres that Scott's talking about. Just to try to point features out to you, so down here is Mohawk River, there's the village of Canajoharie, here is Clinton Road running through, so our main roads in there are Clinton and then Marshville, roughly north-south and roughly east-west. Through pretty much the middle of the project is the National Grid 230 kV transmission line. Coming off of that line is the Marshville-St. Johnsville 115 kV line. That is our point of interconnection. So way back on the top of that hill, over the backside of the hill in the woods, is where the substation will be built to interconnect to the existing line. These gray areas are the panel areas. So we talked about existing topography. There slopes in this area here are no good for us, and other places that are no good for us. We have green areas of forest. We have bluish green areas of wetlands. As you know, especially out in Marshville, it's named appropriately. It's a pretty wet, marshy area. So these are all keep out areas for us. what we are left with is a facility layout, and what you're looking at here is very close to final. That you see that we're spread out, so we have like these clusters of panels in the north.
Excuse me just one second, could you just turn the light switch off and turn the light off all of those? There you go.
Better? Okay. So to show you the dividing line between Minden and Canajoharie is right in there. So about 25% of the project is in Minden, the balance, of course, is in Canajoharie. But when you look at the overview of the project, a 90 megawatt project is a very large facility, but we have a cluster here that's tucked up behind some trees in the hills. We have some more in through the middle of the project area. Down the bottom, we have a cluster here and a cluster down here and some more. So it's not like a massive array of panels like you might see out in the southwest where it's nice and flat, they have lots of land. So we have to tuck it in around, and that really works in our advantage because we try to blend it well with the community that's out there. It's an agricultural community, and you can tuck these things in and use topography to help hide it or help it blend in. I think that really makes a big difference in the overall design.
Joe, could you show, we're going to have an aerial, we're going to have a visual simulation here. Could you show where that's taken from?
Yeah, so we have done, as part of the Article 10 process, visual simulations. We took 185 pictures around the whole project area, got a whole bunch of people on a conference call to decide is that the right selection of pictures. One that we'll present to you today was taken right, so this is Clinton Road and this is Marshville Road. If you're familiar with that intersection, if you're looking north, there's a good view to the north. We actually have one picture we'll show you roughly right in that area on Ezra Wangert's land. It was taken from there towards the northeast. So you'll be able to see that, and that's actually the next slide, I think.
Yeah, before we move on, just go back one step. What you'll notice here is that this is a tax map based on the county information, and so we're looking at property boundaries here, and we're set back from those property boundaries. So neighboring, we have participating and non-participating properties. So we have the local law that we have to adhere to, but again, I just wanted to point out the fact that you can see that there's a space between that's very much in the design of the project.
So here in Canajoharie, that gap right there is intentional, as well as along here. Those are all to comply with the zoning requirements for setback. There's some other areas that we don't comply, which are within the project area, and we're going before both Canajoharie and Minden ZBAs to talk. We've been in to see them a bunch of times, so they know what our plans are, but we're going to go before them to ask for variances on these issues here where we're tighter than the ordinance currently is written.
Sure.
If you could go back to that. So a lot of these clusters are crossing land boundaries, landowners, right? So what are you doing with the underground cables going across these non-participating landowners?
We don't cross the non-participants, so it's all the facilities themselves are on participating landowners.
But you said they were, in the beginning, I thought you said they were all the clusters were connected together.
They are,
How are
so
you doing that?
So, well, here the yellow line actually is, I don't know how well that shows up, but the yellow line is, we call it the collection system. It's the, whoops. I'm sorry, can you bring me back up? So the yellow line on there is our intended path for the collection circuit. That passes across participating landowners in every case. In some cases, they don't have, there are some participating landowners that have easements only. They don't have panels going on there. One particular, one of our biggest one is an Amish landowner who liked the idea of panels, but he said, hey, I need to give some land to my boys someday. So he didn't want to dedicate panel area, but he was willing to take a buried cable. So that's one, and let me see if I can get back there.
The one on the left.
But every landowner, whether they have panels or buried cable, they're all signed up with a long-term lease or easement agreement. There's nothing on anyone else's property that's not directly a participant in the project.
Basically, we don't have rights to go on not participating. Right?
Do you need the light
Turn
back
the light
on?
back on for just a second, please, thanks. You guys really aren't that good.
And that's, what you're talking about is really the design process. It's trying to first find interested landowners. You come up with a preliminary array, and then you start working on how do you connect from one point to the other. So that drives your land control and neighbors that you're talking to, landowners. So it's a long, involved process.
You're also building a pyramid, I see.
Yes.
Yes, we're into that. And that's the sun reflecting off
Might
of
need
it.
to take the USB controller out to give you mouse back. Might be
It
giving
might,
him
the
control
clicker
on
might be,
his
yeah, the clicker needs to be. There we go.
Smart.
I get into those problems all the time in classrooms.
So again, this slide is from where Joe mentioned before. This is about a half-mile away from these panels.
Yeah, so this is off Ezra Wengert's land looking up to the north towards the transmission line. That's, I mentioned about the Niagara Mohawk National Grid transmission line running basically through the project area. And our substation is back behind those trees over there. You pretty much, I don't think you can see it from anywhere. It's going to be tucked in there. But these panels here are, we don't have, obviously, there's no vegetative buffer that we put in here. This is viewing it as kind of a worst case picture. And the guys who do it say it is remarkably accurate to what it is when it's actually built. So we'll be doing this as part of the Article 10 process for multiple sites around the project, about a dozen sites around the project area.
But we will be surrounding the array with camouflage.
Yes, one of the things that works in our favor from the property line point of view is the existing hedgerows. We're essentially leaving those everywhere. Let me just go back to this other slide here. And the towns really like that. The towns that asked us to try to protect those hedgerows, generally they define property lines, but we're going to be using a lot of existing vegetation. And so like along Nestle Road here, there are panels back there, but there's a big heavy buffer there already. We're not taking that out. These hedgerows all along through all these areas, those are going to stay. That's one area, we'll probably take that one out, and I think there's one more over here. But otherwise, we're going to use natural vegetation, existing vegetation wherever possible. And then we have a landscape architect that'll come through and design buffers from roads or from any homes that might be nearby and so on, to try to buffer it really well.
So is the entire perimeter fenced or not?
Every cluster is fenced
Right.
in some fashion. But
And is that fence some sort of, what was the word you used? What's a good one?
Camouflage.
Camouflage, thank you.
Well, what we have right now, it's in the town, it's a 8.5 foot fence by the local law, and it would be a chain fence. And we're looking at different, black may be better than, a galvanized. So we're looking at ways that we can minimize just the visual impact. What happens to vegetation on that fence if we can plant along the fence and actually have vines growing up into it? We're not looking at putting a cover on the fence itself, if that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I think that's not in our plans to do something like that.
And one of the things that we've learned from dealing with landscape architects is that adding things to it can become more, make it less natural. And so having a fence that you can see through, because of course it is that way, can make it disappear more. If we were to put extra things on it, you end up now creating something that attracts the eye and looks unnatural. So it's kind of an art form to put this whole thing together that would work well. But we're going through, the Article 10 process is really detailed, makes us go through, this is one of many different subjects we have to deal with and present plans, get feedback from the communities, tweak those plans and so on. So we'll be going through many, many times and working with the locals on it.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Again, it's the involvement of the towns and the local, the citizens themselves are supposed to be involved, and we want them to be involved in this issue as well. Clearly, we wanted to have a very clean project. This is renewable energy. We believe in what we're doing here. Can we take all the visual impacts away? No, that's going to be impossible to do, but we're going to do our best to minimize it as much as we can. So again, just as an overview, this is a 90.5 megawatt project. We're looking at, with the energy produced, would be about, on an annual average, would be equivalent to about 20,000 households. Joe showed you where the interconnect point would be with this St. Johnsville-Marshville line. Again, Avenue Renewables is the owner of the project, so we are the developer, and Joe is helping as well from Community Energy. Which I think the important part here, as far as timeline, you can see that here we are in 2018. This project's been worked on from late 2017 or even before that. 2016. But our COD date, our operation date, turning on the switch, we're looking at the end of 2021. So these projects take a long time to do, and in many respects, because we have a lot to do on the permitting side to convince folks that this is the right thing to do, and rightly so. There's state agencies are involved, you're involved, federal agencies, wetlands. We just completed one of the avian, the raptor study, and the DEC was just involved in a phone call. All these agencies are all a part of this, so it's an extremely detailed procedure.
One other thing I just want to jump in on, we've of course taken into account where this project's located in the Mohawk River Valley. So obviously there's a lot of history here from the Mohawk Nation, and we've done, before we ever even started, we did desktop research to see where were the castles typically located, so that we weren't building a project right where they are, and they're not here. This isn't it. But certainly there was a lot of activity, and there are artifacts that can be found. So we've dug into, literally actually, been digging in to the project area to see what's there. We've had several instances where we found what we thought was a little more than you probably should find, and we've excluded our project area from that. So and I have stories of someone who told me that their grandpa said that was an old Indian powwow site. Well, we did some research, pulled some maps from 1905, and said, yeah, we have a 99% certainty that there might be some buried, there might be some remains there. So we're not going near that treed area. We're not going to touch it. We're going to leave that alone. And so the project snakes around all of these things, whether it's wetlands, it's forests, it's archaeological finds, all these different things. We take that all into account. And that's our design is 95% done, but we have a little bit more field work to be done on archaeology, and then we'll be able to say we know where everything is and we're avoiding it.
Right, I think the point is that we're trying to do all this up front. So when we put our application, and hopefully we can submit our application to the state in November of this year, we want to try and get all these questions answered and present the most complete project, and it's covering all the bases. And what's really interesting, even what we showed you as far as that array, as of 2 days ago, we heard from our environmental consultant, PDR out of Syracuse, who actually did the visual simulation, that there's another area that they found where we are, right now we have panels, and that's going to impact the design that you just saw. So things are in flux, but again, 95%, considering how difficult this is a good place to be, even though we've got until 2021 to build this. So what we've looked here is what's of interest to you folks here. There's another slide coming up here that gets more into detail on these numbers, but all in over the lifetime of this project, we're looking at 30 to 40 years for the lifetime of this project. You're looking at over $5 million coming into the school district. So we have landowner payments. So each one of these landowners, they have an easement. The folks that have panels on their land are being paid by a per acre basis. As far as full-time jobs, we're looking at up to 5 jobs, and they're very well-paying jobs. When you look at benefits for these folks, you're in the over maybe $120,000, $130,000 full benefits. At the end of the day, we're looking at $15 to $20 million into the local economy. This project will bring in over the long term. And at the end of the day, again, here we are. We have in New York State, we have the Clean Energy Standard. And we're looking to be 50% renewables by the year 2030. So it's a very progressive project. You got to look at this as it's a leading edge project that Canajoharie will be part of. So we look at that as a big benefit. Also, what comes out of this project is it's a potential for careers. What happens when a project like this is built, you end up, the unions and the other workforce use these projects as how to train employees. We've met with the unions and other companies. That's a really important part that they want everybody to understand. This is a training facility. These people will have the knowledge to go from this job as an apprentice, per se, to move on to something new. So I just want to make that this generates jobs over long term, not just to stay here on this project, but through the county and through the state.
Could you give a few more details on the amount that will come into the local economy and how that will
Sure. Well, so different ways to look at it, but with $135 million capital cost, there are some studies that suggest what the percentages are that come into the local economy, and that's where the $15 to $20 million comes from. We actually consider that to be a low number. It's probably actually more than that, but it's kind of difficult to nail down. That's why we kind of just give round numbers, because where are the supplies coming from? Where are the workers coming from? Where are they going to have to be housed? Where are they going to be eating meals? Where are they getting gas? What porta potties are we going to be using? All these things are in the future for us, so we can't nail that down yet. We don't know exactly what all that is. But from other projects, and we've done a bunch of projects in 15 different states, these are the sorts of numbers that we certainly see. Definitely looking to have a real positive impact into the economy. Landowner payments, and it's not something to just really skim over. Landowners are going to be taking somewhere probably in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $600,000 worth of payments per year, and so if you drive through the area, obviously a lot of dairy farm, and it's not a lot of extra disposable income, and buildings are starting to degrade, and we know our landowners. We're in there talking to them all the time. They're our friends, and they have already said, well, I have to fix the roof, I'm putting the windows on, I'm doing all this. So just in general, those landowner payments are a big stimulus because they spend their money local. So if you take that landowner payments over the course of 30 years, it's $18 million. It's a lot of money, and probably not in this line item I have here, 15 to 20, but probably 40% of landowner payments stays local. These people aren't going away. They're not retiring to Florida. They're just going to upgrade, and they're going to go out to eat, and they're going to buy cars, and they're going to do all those things. So it's kind of fuzzy, and the models that we use are the best models that are available, but yet they're still sort of fuzzy, and it's difficult to really nail down especially at this stage, because we haven't gone out for bids, we don't know what contractors are gonna be used, where they're coming from, all of that. But we wanna keep everything as local as we can. Just the potential career focus, I just wanna point out, with 5 jobs here, we also have people, we're not including that, are the grass cutters, the lawnmower, or the snow removal people and things like that. But there are jobs, but if you look at a 50% by 2030, that is a massive number that's going to come from the state and throughout the state. And so this is a contributor along with all the other projects, and there's going to be a big demand for skilled trades, electricians, mechanical people, project supervisors, and so on. So we try to work with the local communities to build that educated workforce, because it's coming, there's no doubt. You could probably list 10 projects that are, at least 10 projects in Montgomery County that are either working today or are in planning stages. And more will be coming throughout the state. So every one of those are going to need workers, good paying jobs that are staying local. So it's an important impact to the state as a whole.
What has been your experience in other projects in terms of how many of the workers are local rather than imported?
A lot of it depends on where it's at. And so projects that we've done down in Virginia, we were able to pull from cities that weren't too far away. And so it's local in that respect. We think that we're in a good position because we're in the capital region, Mohawk Valley capital region. There's probably a good workforce we'd be able to get in that kind of area. But other places, Pennsylvania, I'm working on something, and it's very rural. Where are you going to get local? Where are you going to get local people? You'll hire as many as you can, but where can you get a large workforce? Because it doesn't exist. So I think in this location, we're going to do well to be able to pull people from a relatively short distance. But it does vary from state to state and wherever you're at in that state.
Can you explain more about the top line, the top bullet here?
Yeah, it's actually my next slide goes into a little bit more detail.
That's fine.
So the important thing, so Scott's been doing renewables probably as long as renewables have been around.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't realize it's that long. I talk about around the year 2000 as being the old people. Scott's been around longer than that. But we have a lot of experience with renewable projects, primarily wind. It's only been relatively recent that solar costs have dropped enough to make them competitive on the grid. Wind was always the place where you can get the costs down to be competitive with other sources. And so what we've run into time and time again is when you do these renewable projects, they're placed in an area that lots of times are wind farms. There aren't very many good competing uses for that land. Solar projects, we're going to be going into agricultural areas and so on. But whenever we have income that is generated by a wind farm or a solar project, there really aren't burdens on the community like you would see for housing development or so on. So these are projects that generate income without costs or without almost without any cost to the towns. They're not going to be plowing more roads. They're not going to be hiring more police. They're not going to be putting in water lines or whatever. So that money, when we say it's additive taxes without cost, that's what we mean. We see that with wind, we see that with solar as well. But to get kind of more into the specifics, just on tax impact, the first thing I just want to point out is that all of our leases have us paying any increases in taxes that occur. So our landowners only have whatever they have today, that's what they have long term. So there's no additional burden on the landowners. Pilot payments are in addition to current and underlying real estate taxes. So there's nothing these are not taking away from something that you already have. This is just extra money that flows into the community. But when you look at specifically for the taxes, there are a couple different elements to it that are important to pay attention to. All these areas are under agricultural exemption right now. When the panels go on, we're going to violate the covenants of the agricultural exemption, and essentially land gets kicked out of that exemption. So when that happens, we have a one-time penalty payment for that. these numbers here are what we estimate this school district will see. These are just a share of the project. But we anticipate this school district seeing approximately $85,000 from that ag exemption penalty payment. Ongoing, the land will be assessed at a non-ag exempt value, and so we pay that additional, that increase, so the landowners don't see that. But we estimated $15,000 per year would be Canajoharie School District's piece of that. Just to put it in perspective, right now, our estimate is that the entire project area pays about $27,000 a year in real estate taxes. That's not including the buildings, it's the land. And we will be doubling it just with this alone. We will double that number as the project whole. Now, there's also, of course, the pilot that we are working with Montgomery County IDA on, a 15-year pilot with a 2% escalator on it. The share that my calculations show that the school district would see is in year one, $117,000 with a 2% escalator over the life of the project, or over the life of the pilot, it's about $135,000 average. So it's like from 117 to 157, I think it is, with the escalator built in. On average, 135,000. We also have an interconnection switch yard that has to be built. That's a requirement by National Grid. So that is a piece of equipment that doesn't exist today that will be installed, and we estimate the taxes from that at $78,000. Now that's payable over 30 years of the life of the project. We talk about being 30, it might be 40. But for 30 years at $78,000, and I'm sure that'll increase as the millage rates increase. That number will increase as well. But if you sum it up, year one, the impact to this school district we expect to be $296,000 plus or minus a little bit. I don't math, rounding errors start to add up and these sorts of things, but around that kind of a number, and then ongoing $211,000 to the school district. If you add that up over the life of the project, over $5 million.
That would be 30 years.
That's on 30 years, yes. Now, I mentioned also about the landowner payments, and someone I've been working closely with is a tax assessor in one of the local towns, and he said, don't forget to mention that people will be spending money on their property. They'll improve that. Those improvements will add to the tax base, and all of that starts to grow. It all starts to float upward. So this is our estimate right now, though, and we've scrubbed these numbers. We've really gone into them in detail, so I think they're pretty accurate.
So, if you go back to the timeline you showed us,
Yep.
where in that process of starting to completing do these tax charges hit?
They're all going to be tied with the first assessed year of operation. I think we're at the July 2021. I think that's when it is.
That's when the rollback hits too?
Yes, we're not doing anything to the, well, we'll start doing work on the land before that. It'll be triggered, but my understanding is that, I think the tax year starts on, is it right, July 1st, I think it starts? So that's when it'll be felt. It'll start late in the previous year or earlier in that year of 2021, but it'll actually be felt. The first tax bills will be felt then. Now the pilot payment is made, and we still have to work through these final details with the IDA, but I believe the payment is due at the start of construction. So I think you would start to see that 117 number roll in here late in 2020, or whenever construction starts, right around that time. We're not exactly sure when that'll be based on the permitting process. But that's the only piece. And until you build on it, you don't violate the ag covenants, so those change of use won't hit until the 2021 tax bill, summer 2021. The interconnection switch yard, would be constructed at about the same time. I think that would hit summer of 2021 as well. And so,
You maybe you're gonna get to this, but who is going to be doing the maintenance of the solar panels?
We will have a staff. So we showed up to 5 employees, so there'll be an on-site staff that will take care of.
Within this local area?
Right, so we'll have new employees that will work on this project, and we're assuming that they're gonna be local. And also, as Joe mentioned, we'll be using local part-time workers on snow removal, grass cutting, and other needs as well.
you know, often with these projects, you'll see, when we talk about jobs, they have FTE, full-time equivalents. And so that's where our summer grass cutters, our winter snow plowers come in. They're not included in our 5 number. Those up to 5 is actual direct employees, new employees that'll be working here. We're also considering about building a small building right on the project area that would house them. So we're working through those details too, but they have to be close enough that they could get to work every day. So I don't know how far away they choose to live, but we're hoping they would come right from the town.
And who is their employer, they found
It would be Avenue.
And I give my plug for Avangrid. We've worked together since 2006. Absolute top-notch developer, building the Cadillacs of projects, make them work very well, perform well over the long-term owner-operator. In the industry, sometimes you find that these projects can change hands. That's what happened with us. We started the development. We love to keep it, but we're a relatively small company, but we have good friends in Avangrid. We've worked with them before. They're the ones that come in, take it, and keep it long-term. One owner, own and operate. It would be the same fate. You'll be seeing him for 30 more years.
Actually, Avangrid is the 2nd largest developer in the U.S. As far as the world, it's the #1 renewable energy developer. So it's got a lot behind it, and I'm very proud of what, the amount of attention that you're seeing that's in this project. What we strive to do here is get to know folks. And I've just begun this since September. And what Joe's been able to do to sit down and talk to landowners and get to know folks, I mean, that's really what development should be about, is being a part of the community, being trusted in the community. I worked at Maple Ridge for 5 years. Probably 3 days a week I was in a hotel, my family back in Clifton Park. I got to know those landowners. I can go into that community and feel very comfortable of the friends that I've made with the landowners. So that's what we're striving to do here as well.
This is our last slide, other than just a closing slide, but one of the things we try to do whenever we come into the communities is we have to try to build the workforce. We have to try to get people interested in this industry. And so what we would like to do is talk about maybe putting in a small-scale solar project here on the land. We have to work through the details of how that actually happens. But I have contacted some smaller scale. We don't do this kind of work. We're large scale, but I've contacted some small scale, one small scale installer. I gave them general details. I don't know very many details, but I gave it to them, and they said this should be no problem at all. We should be able to get this thing installed and net meter it, supply electricity back into the one building, or I don't know how it would actually work. And then, of course, it's a technology demonstrator for the students. They have interactive displays to show how much energy has been produced. That can be somehow spread throughout the school, that people can be interested and get excited about it. But really, it's good because I've said this in a public meeting last year. Everyone's always worried about their grandchildren, children, grandchildren getting up and moving away, but here, right around us, is an opportunity for people to get good long-term employment. We just have to get them trained and get them interested. Get them interested first, then get them trained. So we'd like to work with the school district to find out, the details of this. There's some more details, but we would like to see if we can donate some money to the school for this purpose. And we're also looking to do the same thing at Fulton Montgomery Community College. I met with the president out there a few months ago to see what would they need in a training program. Can we buy some specific equipment for them or something like that? But we have to build a workforce because 50% by 2030, 2030 is not very far away, and we're going to have to staff these facilities. We have to be able to build them, we're going to have to maintain them. It's all going to come from local employment. So we hope that we can work with the school district to work out through those details and really give a benefit to get the kids interested in doing this. And of course, the other thing is you're going to have right down the road currently the largest solar project in the state of New York. And that'll be something to be available for tours and so on that maybe we can get people more excited about the opportunities that are right here. But you can see it, it's literally right here. And it's really, I think, an exciting thing, not worrying about the kids going off to. I worry about too. I have 3 small children, and I wonder what are they going to do? Are they going to leave me? I don't want them to, so I'd like to find a way to keep them local. So this is, I think, a good thing. But I'm happy to talk with whoever the right person is, go through you, a facilities manager, whatever it might be, how we can work out the details and try to get something installed here at the school.
And to kind of piggyback on what Joe's talking about, what we're looking at around the state and these areas is potentially scholarships for schools. So we're looking very hard at that, how we can help as well. So let's continue this conversation, and we'll get back with you with some ideas on how we think we can proceed.
And that's it for our. So just this one last picture. I know I have to stop talking sooner or later, but this is a tracker. This is what we would have, tracker panels. So those panels will be in a stowed position like this, horizontal, during the evening. In the mornings, they will automatically elevate, face east, they'll track the sun, and then face west, and come back to stowed like that again. So this is what the project would actually look like.
Can we have some lights?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, any other questions?
What's the closest comparable project that you would look at?
Oh, we have this beautiful project down in Pennsylvania. Of that size, there isn't any in the state of New York. There aren't any in the state of New York. It would be, of that size, I'm actually struggling to see where our closest would be down in Virginia. We have some out into the Midwest. But there's nothing of that size that you can look at that's close. This would be a big project.
Yeah, there is a project up in the Potsdam area that's on the county airport, but it's again, it's just not the size that we're looking at here. But let us research that for you, and we'll see if we can.
And where does the energy go?
Well, it's sold wholesale onto the existing grid. And so we're working right now. We have a bid into NYSERDA for the purchase of the renewable energy credits on that. And so solar projects have 2 revenue sources: the energy itself, and then the renewable energy credits. So NYSERDA has an ongoing bid process. We do have this project bid into that. I'm not sure when we'll hear back, probably.
By the end of the year.
Yeah, so it's not too far off, we'll hear about that. And the energy itself is just going to go into the wholesale market, be consumed by everyone these lights here would be powered by solar in 2021. It's all local.
To follow that up, could you possibly, since they are far away, could you possibly provide like an aerial view of some of these bigger projects, so we can get to see what they look
Absolutely.
like?
Yeah, and Google Earth is a great resource.
Right,
for
that's
that
why
as
I'm
well.
asking.
Yes. Yeah, good idea.
I'm sure you can find a good view of them to show us.
And we, one of our communities a privately held company, one of the owners lives in Glens Falls, and he always says, every time you see these aerial views, they look like Walmart parking lots. And so nobody ever sees that view except from an airplane. But, you know, we have some that, Virginia projects in particular, that are clustered like this, so you can get a feel for, okay, you're gonna have 5 megawatts here, 3 here, 8 over there, and that's kind of what we're seeing here, so, you know, certainly we can provide that.
And if you can provide us with a location, we can certainly use Google Earth.
Yeah,
Sure, we'll do that.
Sure.
I don't just see the area.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Any other questions? I have a couple. First, I'd like to tell you, I mean, I'm a big proponent of solar and renewable energy. My own house is 100% solar as well as geothermal. So, but one of the questions that I have is, in addition to the tax issues which you addressed,
Mhm.
are there any other benefits that you foresee that local residents might get? What I'm thinking of in terms of, for example, is, you know, some community solar concepts where people might buy energy from renewable rather than fossil fuel generated. And usually that also saves them money as well.
We've actually looked at doing that, but the New York State rules have set size limits for projects that do that. We actually have some projects that are, we would call community scale projects, where people are able to tap into that, but because of our size, we're over the limit, so we're not able to offer that particular product to immediate communities.
Are there any other benefits besides tax benefits that you envision, other than, like you said, the generating revenue for the community and so forth? Is there anything else that you can think of that projects of this type is meant for the communities that they're in?
Well, we talked about, we had it in our slide a little bit, like, lots of times these projects go into communities that are, when we searched for this, for where to put a project, one of the ways that we found is our owner who lives in Glens Falls, he said, follow the Mohawk River. Because of course that was where the industrial base was through all these previous years, and now that's dwindled somewhat. And so what we see, and we actually have, it's kind of more of a feel-good story, I guess, difficult to quantify, but renewable projects typically are going in these sorts of communities, and to be able to be embraced by a community really shows that community to be progressive in nature. And we've seen that in wind farms. We see where this is a bit of a stretch, but this actually did happen. The wind farm that I built, the Amazon headquarters #2. That went out for a nationwide bid. They were specifically looking for how renewable focused is your community. So the economic developer from that county called me and said, Joe, tell me how many turbines you got there, how much energy you produce and all that, and they submitted a bid to Amazon. Now I doubt they're going to win because it's relatively rural, but these are the sorts of things as these more and more companies are obviously being aware of the climate change, and looking for who's trying to step into it and support it. And so you can't quantify that, but this is definitely one thing we've seen in different projects where you're branding yourself as a forward thinker, not left in the industrial past, but a new technology, clean technology future.
One other question I have is, when you talk about jobs, training people for jobs for the future, and I was wondering if you consider or involved in any of your other projects, internship programs with students from the school district, so they can actually really learn the skills that would enable them to get these kind of jobs.
And that's something that I'm alluding to as well from Advocate's perspective, is what we can do with the high school here for something like that as well. So we really are looking to put that plan together and something like that would come out of that. So, back to your question before, I think that the environmental part of this is very important. And again, I think it comes again back to the idea of being very progressive, being stewards of the land. I think this is a way of showing that. We're talking about fossil fuels, we're talking about climate change, believe it or not, and this is all what this project is about. And again, you come into these communities and you become, we're trying to make as many people involved in this project as well, as far as financially, and so I think it's a unique way for folks to be involved in an energy project. You don't see that any other way. So renewable does bring that to the table. I was working on a project in upstate New York. This knocking on doors and sitting down with people, these projects can change lives, quite honestly, to an individual who's really struggling. And keep their farm, keep their house, keep their land. It enables folks to keep the land exactly the way they wanted it. There's a lot of benefits.
We see that over and over again. I know of landowners, I'm sure they will want me to mention any names, on our project right now who have told me if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to sell my land. And people who are really worried about when we're going to come online so that they can capture the revenue that they're looking for to keep going. And they don't want to leave their land. They want to continue to farm. We work with our landowners where in some cases, in a lot of cases, they've only given us a piece of their property because they want to be able to continue to farm and do what they love. I traveled to another part. I was out in the Finger Lakes region on Tuesday and met with a farmer, and he's 80 years old. I'm not sure what his wife is, somewhere close to that. And we're saying we just have to do something. And it makes me feel good because I can come into the community and I know I can offer something that can really help the community. And dairy farmers are struggling, as you probably know. It's really tough for them. And so we try to model is set aside a piece of this, we'll give you some stability on your payments for your land. You can just keep doing what you're doing. We're not trying to get them off their land. They want to continue to be dairy farmers. That's all they know, for the most part. So it seems to be working quite well, and we're seeing that right here on this project too. So when I go looking for other projects, there's lots of dairy land in New York State, and I know they're all having problems, and we can be a life ring for them, and we're seeing that right here as well. And of course, if you look at the reverse, if a project wasn't there and they're selling land, well, one landlord told me this. He said, "Who am I going to sell to? I'm selling to a depressed market, which drives down the overall costs. The price of the land, that's the assessed value, taxes overall start falling, all because of that." So he's really hopeful that he doesn't have to leave his land, that it's will work out eventually. So, but it kind of, I become part of the community. It's got, this is how it is when you develop it. We get to know these people, who are their grandchildren, all that. And we're really trying our best to make it work. We really are. They are depending on us. And more than just doing the job and building a project, those particular folks are really depending on us to be successful. So we're doing our best to make it work.
All right, well, thank you for your
Well, thank you
presentation.
very much.
Obviously, we'll be considering it at a future meeting, and if you have any further questions, then we'll certainly ask them.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right there.
Thanks for having
Please
us.
don't leave it out.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys safe trips.
Okay, the next point on the agenda is ESA title grant allocations.
All right, so Ms. Ford and I write the ESSA grant. This year, it moved from the NCLB, No Child Left Behind, to the Every Student Succeeds Act. Earlier last spring, we gave you all an overview of the accountability portion of ESSA. We wanted to give you a brief summary, so I'll let you read all the details and just tell you what's different of how this grant application has been revised and restructured this year. and how we've linked it to already existing things happening in the district. We did see an increase in Title I-A money. That purpose is to support specific student needs and/or obstacles that impact student achievement. Those are academic, social, emotional, medical, or family. What we needed to do this year was to look at identifying objectives. So you see there are 3 objectives there. They are all our Canjo Great targets that fit under Title I-A, as well as how we proposed in the grant to spend the money that we get from the grant funds. The overview of expenditures is not anything different than we've done in past years. What is new under Title I-A is the addition of specific objectives. Would you like me to do all the titles, or would you like to ask any questions you might have by title?
How about if we ask questions by
Okay.
I have one, because I wasn't here in the spring, but what is, the number of students reading at grade level right now, since you wanna increase it to 75%?
65. It's at the end of 2017-18 school year, it was 65%.
55?
60.
My question was, it says supports, what percentage of the costs listed under the overview of expenditures is Title I covered?
100% of the 3 full-time salaries and a portion, point something of a middle school. Point two, thank you. So full-time salaries 1.0, they're full salaries, and 0.2, thank you Stacy, of the middle school teacher's salary, who is fulfilling AIS teaching responsibilities.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Your, increase the number of students achieving proficiency on the state assessments by 10%, is that, 3 through 8 assessments?
Yes.
Or is that regions as well?
We have, no, that's 3 through 8. We have a different Canjo target for mastery on regions. That doesn't fit under Title I-A.
Okay, and your reduced course failures by grade level, is that, middle school and high school and elementary, or is it just elementary?
Middle school and high school.
So, I think you answered my question about bullet 1, what about the rest of the expenditures under bullets?
What about, I don't
What
understand what the question is.
percentage is this Title I amount covering of the remaining 3 bullets?
Yes, please. Stacy's got that, that's 10 up.
The high school learning support teacher aid and the middle school learning support teacher aid are both
You say it louder, sorry.
The high school, middle school learning support teacher aid positions are both 1.0 FTEs. And if I also look at their employee benefits, I believe they're all of their.
So it's 100%.
100%, yeah.
Summer intervention
It's,
program?
that's the salaries for the teachers, so it's 100% of those salaries, and we put materials under there too, I believe. I don't know if the FS 10, that's what Stacy liked my team.
Yes,
So
all the supplies.
It's all supplies.
As well as the bus driver and as well as the aide that's in the cafeteria for the hour and the 45 minutes when they arrive.
And the last bullet, is that 100% too?
Well, that's reserve that's required based on a calculation within the grant. So the McKinney-Vento homeless reserve is required. That reserve supports materials. It does not support people for students who are homeless. So the calculation is based on the number of students we have.
We $15,000.
There's a calculation within the grant that's required.
And then it just gets used for that purpose?
That's what, yes. So under, could you go below the thing on McKinney-Vento?
No, that's okay.
That's what it's, so you can't, it helps kids access things in school they may not otherwise be able to access. That's the summary statement.
Okay, anything else on Title I?
I just had a quick question. I think I know the answer, but supports 3 full-time salaries. I'm assuming these are existing positions. They're not new positions, correct?
Okay, Title II.
So Title II, we have historically used for professional development. There's no difference there. but it has to focus and be linked to the district's professional development plan. So, our plan from last year focuses on literacy, social emotional growth, mental health, and technology integration. The plan will come up in October, its cycle is October, so it'll be updated then. So, it's also, what's new is the addition of specific objectives to meet. There are now the other piece that's new, that's interesting under Title II, is if you use it for professional development, you can align your money with certain categories that never existed before. So I listed the categories for you so that you can see that the money can be aligned with those, or you can do an other category. If you do other category, then there's additional information you have to provide. We were able to use the categories to allocate some of the funds, and they're all there for you. And that's new. So the two things that are new there are categories for professional development as well as the objectives. That funding is about the same as last year, by the way, right?
Just
It's
one,
20.
um,
It's 20, because they forgot to give us 20 last
Oh, well,
year.
that's right, sorry, just to clarify. The allocation was about the same, but then New York State forgot to give people money last year, so we got a little bit more.
so,
rules.
my only question was the detail around what we were doing in the one-to-one here for the professional development, and whether that was integrated with the tech plan that we've already discussed.
It's the same thing, it'll be the same thing. So the board goal action around the one-to-one PD is this.
Okay.
It's the same thing. That's how you do it. You link it all together.
So are all of the teachers in the district being able to receive this professional development in all of these different areas? I mean, obviously not every teacher is getting everyone in every single area, but.
Right. If you look at the overview of expenditures, you'll see that there are some in-district presenters. So we have in our October day, presenters coming to talk about trauma-based instruction, the one-to-one computing. When that plan gets done, will be for everybody. Our K-8 staff are heavily involved in the social emotional growth and mental health classroom strategies areas. But then there's also professional development stipends for teachers. Those are for projects that teachers determine that they want to do around curriculum and or instruction. And then there's also the out of districts, which are self-selected conferences by teachers that align with the district professional development plan.
Thank you.
Yes? Okay. 4A.
Okay, so Title IV-A is back. You may not have ever known it was gone, but if you've been in education for a long time like me, Title IV-A was here, was gone, and now it's back. It's back in a little bit of a different form. It's back under student support and academic enrichment. We received an allocation this year of $20,352. Their purpose, because it is new, is to meet the goal of providing all students with a high-quality education. One of the big, if you will remember, and we'll come back and visit this again sometime this year, one of the big pieces of ESSA is about equity for all students. Equity in education for all students. So this is one piece that they are looking at. When you look broad in New York State, there are a variety of different barriers that students might face. One, though, of the opportunities that we have here under student support is around health and safety. Since safety has been such an issue in our district in the past year, we are looking at using that allocation to support the salary of our school safety officer. The category that it fits under is safe and healthy students. Also, you need to have objectives. So we've put some objectives in there as well. Those are data that we collect on a regular basis, but certainly things that we hope are either direct or tangential outcomes or connected outcomes to our school safety officer.
Questions, comments? What is major?
Violent and disruptive incident report. You're welcome. Sorry, we used that lingo and didn't spell it out.
Okay, then Title V.
Title V is an allocation that has a cyclical amount to it, meaning some years we get more, some years we get less. The purpose of Title V, rural low-income students, is to help meet some specific students' needs. Its intention is to be seed money. So when we originally started our summer program for our students who, our Summer Stars program at the elementary school, as well as at the middle school and at the high school, we used Title V money to seed that. And then we moved it into Title I. So what's interesting about Title V, you have to have an articulated objective, but also you can connect it to another title, meaning Title I-A, Title II-A, Title IV-A if you chose, monies, you can connect it to those allowable expenses. So our proposal connects to Title II-A around the social staff development for our K-8 staff in social emotional learning for their school-wide programs.
Questions, comments?
So the only question I had is, how can we turn that into action that impacts broadly? So you referred to it as seed money, and as I was reading this, my thought was, this is professional development for people to go to conferences. Can we put some stipulations that it turns into train the trainers so that we truly are broadening its impact across the district when people come back?
Right, well, these are for the programs that are already in place, so that is already happening. So when we send teachers out to conscious discipline, they're coming back, working with their teachers on their teams or their fellow colleagues as well to do and continue that work.
So is this nothing new then?
No, this isn't anything new, this is supporting
So this
K-8.
is- This is basically the discipline program continuing.
It's conscious discipline, right, moving, and now this year, conscious discipline is in the middle school along with their middle school 2.1. You guys really, I always call it 2.0. 2.0, 3.0, whatever they're calling it. So this is to help support continued staff development in those areas. So East Hill is in year 3. The middle school is in year 1 1/4, I would say, because they've done a little bit of work already.
My only question is the Title V called rural low-income students. And I'm just wondering how is this geared toward our low-income students?
Well, first of all, our whole district, right, is considered rural and low income. So by empowering the teachers in our social emotional growth programs, then they are helping those students learn those skills and that are part of conscious discipline, or in the middle school, some other skills they've identified.
It's a relatively small amount. So it's
Yes,
not gonna
But
make
it's, but if you,
tremendous difference,
but the idea is you impact the kids by supporting the adults.
I guess I still have the same thing. I just want to make sure this isn't a boondoggle for 6 people to go on conscious discipline training versus 6 people go and they have specific roles when they come back to train other people. That's kind of what I was getting at.
That has not been how it has worked to date. So I guess I would say that when we have people go and come back, they are part of the CDAT team at East Hill. They're part of the middle school 2.0 or 3.0.
see that.
Yeah, the conscious discipline action team.
Okay,
So,
just-
yeah, so they are people who are coming back then and working with their teams and with their teachers. And I would say that I think that our teachers, when they go to conferences, come back, they fill out a post-conference request form. They talk, or post-conference form, they are very clear about what they have learned, and they are very clear about what they are going to do with what they have learned and how they're going to help others. So I think it's been a phenomenal investment of money, and I think our teachers are worth it.
I'm not questioning the teachers.
Right, I'm just saying, we wouldn't put something in that wouldn't try to be helpful to all.
Any other questions on this at all? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If you have any others, just give a holler.
Capital bond resolution.
Leah?
The purpose of this resolution is to authorize authorize the district to issue bonds up to the amount of the capital project, in case we have to start paying bills that are due before the project is completed, which we probably will. And we don't start getting state aid until the project is completed. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we just want to get this in place so we're ready to roll.
Questions?
The only question I had was, since our project is phased, why do we have to do it for the full?
The project isn't phased anymore. The project was only gonna be phased if we could have done the track this past summer, but state ed didn't approve that.
The project's still phased. Different buildings, different things. And it's a multiple year project.
Not anymore, it's all gonna happen next year.
Okay.
So we have this at the max amount of the project, so we can go up to that amount. You ready?
I have a question. So what happens with this bond if we don't need to use it all?
We don't use it all, we just pay it back. We'll figure that out after this. When we start getting these quotes. You don't have to go up to your own amount. Up to the project amount, we don't have to do the whole thing, we don't need it, most likely. Fiscal advisors will help you with that.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next thing is superintendent search. A couple of things. First, I would just like to share with you that I did speak with Dick Rose today, actually. And he is going to be with us on our next board meeting, executive session, to discuss the details of a contract with him for the superintendent search. And he already has a number of things which he needs to do. One is to finalize the brochure, work out where we want to advertise, work out what our application should look like and what you ask, and all these things which we'll be discussing with us, as well as the compensation that we will be offering. So the main thing I think that we really need to talk about tonight is what we discussed, which is discussing some of the characteristics that we would like to see in a superintendent. And we discussed that a little bit in our retreat and last week. And so what we're talking about is characteristics, abilities, experience, educational outlook, and philosophy. So if the floor is open for thoughts on those issues. Obviously, this will be an ongoing discussion. We won't all be spelled out tonight, and certainly be discussing it with Mr. Rose in the next time. So, anyone have any thoughts?
Experience in smaller schools.
I had that same thing, small school experience.
Good personal relations.
Anyone else?
Humble. Sense of humor.
Collaborative. Collaborative management and leadership style. I'd like to see some strategic leadership in terms of vision, direction, some experience, history. having grant experience is nice, not necessary, but nice, that's like an added thing on my list.
I think it's something important, because I think we lost that, just because from other administrators that we've had in the past, and I think that's an important piece.
Right. Inclusive, culture building. I think with all the work we've done on mission, vision, all that, that's pretty critical to me. Supportive of arts programs, I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't necessarily in that vein, and I think for our district, that's critical. I couldn't put this into words very well, but support meeting all students' needs equally. And you kind of talked about that a little bit, Debbie, about the equity piece, right?
Yeah.
I think that they have a balanced outlook for all of our students' needs. I think from an experience perspective, some P&L responsibility in the district is important. Profit loss, budget management, understanding how to do something.
Budget management experience.
Yeah. Integrating technology into curriculum, I think that's kind of our future, so some experience around that, or knowledge at least, would be really important. And with our community effort, I think community engagement experience would be something that we're looking for. That was my list.
And I think also having teaching experience, because you gotta have to have the gamut. But
Any-
the student,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Someone that's willing to meet with the students whenever they need.
anything else?
Kind of talked about vision, trust.
Communication, just to have open communication with all parties involved. Students, parents, teachers, staff.
One of the things I would think would be aggressive and creative educational outlook. That's going to explore and consider new approaches to education.
Creative solutions, those are new things.
Yes.
Which isn't that something that
I like expand student opportunities,
I'm sorry,
expand student opportunities.
and I would say a people person. Just plain anything.
Plain English.
The last one I had on my list was the regs, the whole ESSA stuff, that they're engaged in what's going to be the future of our environment. If they're going to be able to lead our district to adapt and knowledge that we have.
Well, this
Should be
looks
no
like there should
problem,
be
right?
lots of candidates.
No problem at all.
No problem.
There we go.
Anything else? And obviously, again, this is, just the starting point. Depending on the candidates that we get, or the strengths and weaknesses, we'll be assessing all the departments. And I think it's something that we can continue adding to and refining as well. So, is that it for now?
Great.
Okay, and then we'll
That's
have,
point on
certainly,
this.
we'll certainly have more of a discussion, so in 2 weeks we'll be. So, very good. Moving right along, Olivia.
So I went from class to class and asked students if they were having any issues first week of school, and a lot of them told me scheduling was their biggest concern, and they're unhappy. This has been going on for years. They can't change their schedule until the first day of school. So I think I have a solution for that. We could hold mock classes of, like, the classes over the summer with an overview of the class syllabus and estimated workload, so students would know if they can work it into their schedule before school starts, so they would know whether they have to drop it or not.
Could you just repeat that
I'm sorry.
concept again? I don't think it's in here, is it?
No, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Holding a mock class, a mock class
Mock class.
over the summer with just an overview of the class and the workload.
So are you talking, can I ask you a question? What are you talking about, like, for example, if somebody wanted to take a business course and having the teacher, talk to the students who are interested in that about what that class would be like? Would it be possible if maybe instead of doing it over the summer, because I know the scheduling people are trying to get the schedules together, if there was some kind of week towards the end of the school year where you guys went around to different teachers and got a gist of what those electives are, because when it comes to your core classes, you don't have a choice, you have to take those, but
It's mostly for electives.
for electives, okay.
Yeah, whatever time works best for people that have to make the schedules.
You could almost do like a moving up day, right? Like we do,
Right.
we bring the 8th graders up. And so when I heard you say that, I thought, well, we always just assume it's just the 8th graders coming to 9th that sort of need that perspective, but it might be that we do a similar thing for our current students, and then they can go to different classes and sort of get a sense of what does that look like, and even maybe interview some of the kids who have been in the class.
Yeah.
So we could almost do like a moving up
Q&A.
experience, not just for the 8th graders coming up, but for all of our 9 through 11s too.
So maybe if it was something like any of the different classes, such as like studio art or music technology, or something like that, where those teachers who are doing those electives could present to those kids what this is gonna be about, so there would be some kind of interest there, and then you'd have a better idea as to how many students would want to be in those classes.
Great.
So are students getting into classes their first week and then they can't drop them, or they're not, there's a timeline that's, help me
Not
understand this.
recommended. They don't want you to drop them. You're supposed to drop your classes before the first day of school.
I thought we had many conversations with this, and
Well,
this was not gonna be
we
an
shared
issue
the
or a
numbers
problem.
out. We shared the numbers out last year of the number of changes that happened. And so we've already met with students. I mean, I've met with several, and I know that Dina has met with several too. We had children change levels, we've had kids swap from one course to another, so we certainly have had kids make schedule changes since we've
I
started.
just think this is a way of like avoiding that.
Yeah, I love the idea of
Yeah, it's a
letting
good
kids,
But there's always a
almost have a
jockey
dry
in the
run.
first couple weeks of school. They should
Right.
have the freedom to go into a class and say, you know what, this is not for me, I need to go into another class. Am I getting the sense that that's not happening? Like we were assured that it was happening?
No, it isn't.
I've not had
So
a
there's a
student.
conflict here.
Right, or there, well, it's just,
Okay, maybe we'll talk about this in executive session, but
excuse me,
I'm hearing a conflict.
I think we shared data. I think it's a student perspective, and then where people are at with changes that are actually happening, because there's a lot of changes that happen. School counseling office is very busy the first 2 weeks of the school year. So what I think we have to do is get to what is the disconnect between the perceptions, because they are changing schedules a lot. And we provide the
I
numbers, so.
haven't had an issue with my own schedule this year. I just know last year I definitely did.
Right.
So things have possibly changed that I didn't know about.
Okay, so I think what we have to find out is where the disconnect is, because it's a narrative that keeps going, but it's not what's necessarily happening. I guess that's where I don't get what's the difference, because we have numbers and we have people who are changing their schedules. They are. So I'm just not really sure what that's about. So maybe if, Olivia, if there were a couple of students I could talk to, or we could talk to, that would be helpful to find out a little bit more.
I can find some people that.
I think maybe a possibility of some of that narrative, and this might be where the disconnect is coming for us, is the sheets that go home to the students, I believe, say on there the last day to drop classes is August 31st, when they haven't been in classes. So that's, I think, where the panic comes along with the students, is because now they're like, well, now I'm stuck.
Okay.
And so I think that might be where the
Okay.
disconnect is, because that piece of information is going out to
Okay.
students and parents.
And I know I, as a parent, I reacted that way when I got that letter.
Okay, all right, well, that's helpful. See those little details.
And I think it would also be helpful to know what are the basis, just not, what are the basis for decisions either to allow a course to be dropped or not. And and if a course is dropped, what are then for options for the student? Just in general, if I came in like third day of school and said, I want to drop this course, how is the decision made and what are the options of the student?
And we keep really specific notes over the summer, because both Gina and I meet with students, and so if you got a letter home that said there was a conflict or that you needed to add a course or anything like that, we try to keep really specific notes of what the conversations were back and forth. And then we had a list of students we still needed to see when school started, if there were students we couldn't touch base with over the summer. So we have sort of 2 layers of lists going that have a lot of that information captured, just sort of student by student, as opposed to how many kids had this kind of comments, you know what I mean?
Okay, Tim, you have a question?
And sometimes there has to be some flexibility, at least in the music department situation, and I'm sure this would carry over to some other academic classes. For example, our select group, I come into the year expecting to have a certain instrumentation, and at the start of the year, things change. Sometimes students go early admit. So a student that I was counting to have in a section isn't there. So now I have to scramble to try and fill that slot, which means I have to ask another student, and they're gonna need to jockey their schedule around and possibly change things. And I know other teachers in my department have felt the same way. So being able to have that flexibility, we have to have that so that we can have the instrumentation that we need. Or sometimes, and this has happened in the past, I had a student in the jazz band who, after the first day, said, so this isn't what I want to do. This is too much pressure on me. So having that ability to change that is necessary.
Okay, so I think that would also be part of the same question about what is the basis of decisions being made to allow a student to drop or change or whatever. So we have some sense of what the considerations are and how the decisions are arrived at.
Right. Yeah, because I don't know until that first day what I have.
See anything else on that? Okay, continue.
I'm sure they're already fixing this. It was just when I was talking to students, a few of them had classes with only 1 or 2 students in them. Like Gabby Betts had a gym class with only herself in it. So I'm guessing there were some problems. But
That was just an error, we
I'm sure they're
created
fixing it.
an adaptive PE class, and the old section didn't get deleted that sat on top of that, so we just had to move her.
I'm sure it got
Yeah.
fixed. I just.
Yep.
So it was a single student incident.
Okay, and the others were just suggestions, so seniors are telling me they wanted the senior laundry open. And, there was bullying in the atrium in the morning, so I guess the solutions for that could be supervision or just a bullying assembly. We could have another one of those. I haven't witnessed it myself.
I did have a student report something to me
Okay.
that we are dealing with, but I also did talk to our school resource officer about it, because he and I are usually the ones out there. He just doesn't know the kids as well as Jason sort of now does, so he's not quite mingling as much, so we talked about that. But we are, October Star is doing the bullying activity that even involves, they're hoping to involve K-12. So hopefully that will sort of circle back around.
School clubs need more organization to keep them alive, because fifth block is the only time that we have, and we're realizing that students are in more than 4 clubs, but also need to keep up with their board academics. So I don't know the solution for that one, but students are trying to find ways to get more involved while still keeping up their education, and they can't find the time.
We did update our club calendar, which we're gonna put out to the faculty so they can start meeting. So we still are trying to do some by days of the week and some by letter days, so we create fewer conflicts. I also had a group come up to me today and ask if they could at least once a month meet after school, and if we could help with transportation. We kind of said we could do that. So I think different groups are trying to figure out different pieces, and we're trying to help with that. But hopefully, once we get the club calendar out, we'll find out where the most conflicts are, and then we can try and switch some things if we need to.
A suggestion on that one. I know we're working on the scheduling committee, and that should be more bullets on that, I think. How that scheduling committee operation.
Oh, yeah, that'd have to be part of it, because, I mean, the simple solution is you move them back to after school. It could be after school, that is a solution, so
I just think
let
that,
for now.
that issue we should make sure is a bullet underneath that
Yeah.
committee to make sure they.
The bigger, not
Exactly.
just the
The bigger
class
thing,
stuff,
right.
but the
Exactly.
extracurricular.
That was my
Yeah,
point, to
yeah.
make sure it's
Yeah,
holistic,
it's
not
holistic,
just
yeah.
looking at the.
Yeah.
And we may be
course
able to
schedule.
find some examples of what
Right.
other schools do in various.
Right.
Olivia, I think
Scheduling
it's great
options.
though that students are wanting to use some of that fifth block, which is the original intent of guided studies, for supporting their schoolwork. So it's a problem
Yeah,
we've got to solve, but it's a good problem to have, right?
When did clubs meet before? Is this like a new thing that we're having this trouble, or?
No, fifth block is the only time that everyone has a study hall since I've been in high school.
Right, so
So
it
it's the
used,
only time
right.
everyone is available.
used to be at the end of the day,
Yeah, I was.
right, or after school.
So the end of the day, last, so was it a period, like?
It was last 20 minutes.
Last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The final thing was health office needs more supplies, specifically ice packs, because,
Sent a message and I got that.
okay, yeah.
But I wonder too if it has to do with, we had to order a new refrigerator for that space, because the old one, the freezer part wasn't functioning correctly. And so we ordered a new freezer, and Mr. May helped us pick out one that has the separate freezer and fridge part, as opposed to, those
Yeah.
used to have the one that was just, it
college
doesn't really
one.
work, the college door one, right? So we ordered a new one that has the separate, and I just wonder if she's been sort of waiting for that new one to come to
I am on it. Is it
update her supply.
Different advantages and.
Yeah, I guess the ice packs are one-time use ones, and they're not working as well anymore, so we should just.
Gotcha. That's good info. All right, thank you, very good.
And, one other thing that I didn't put on here, and I don't know if it's the school's responsibility, but you're the only adults I know to talk to. So, the voting was being held at the elementary school, right? So, there was, an older couple that asked me for help today of whether it was here or there, and they were pretty upset because they didn't know where voting was being held, because sometimes it's in the high school, elementary, or police station. So maybe there's a way we could make it more known to the public of where it is.
We will share that with the county board of elections. Thank you. And certainly, at least if, since they have it here, we could make sure we're informed in this building to provide assistance then to folks who might need it. Thanks. Thanks for helping.
I have one question, is, the first suggestion about the lounge being closed, why is it closed? Why
Well,
will it be open?
Every year we wait for the seniors come to me and come up with their own contract and determine how they're going to sort of maintain the parameters that they set forward, because it really is a student-run area. And so the students actually met with me earlier this week, and they had some great ideas. It was exciting to hear, and so that I just said to them, draw up your contract of what it's gonna look like. I told them that I would pull up the list to get an idea of numbers, how many kids, based on the general parameters they gave me would qualify and stuff like that. We're gonna come back together next week. And I said, when we have our senior class meeting, where I go over all of the ideas with the kids, they can share out about the lounge. And I said, we'll be pulling, reports from the end of last year. And then we will use this year's, 5-quarter, 10-week, or 5-week, 10-week, to make sure kids are staying on top of their academics to maintain their privilege. So the kids did a great job. They had a lot of really great ideas, so they'll get to share out with their classmates.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much, Lydia. This is what we're looking
Thank you.
for with our
Excellent.
student rep, is to give us a lot of feedback and ideas, so thank you. Back to school opening day.
So we have had a good start to this school year. We attached for you the first 5 days of enrollment. That's going to be my part, and then the principals will talk about things that are happening in their buildings. The end of June enrollment was 941 students. Can you scroll down a little bit? So we're at, right now, 934. So we are certainly holding steady. At the end of June, we had 69 non-resident students. We currently have 50 and 6 Head Start students. So the 9 is our Head Start pre-K, that's everybody. That's counted in that one, correct?
Children in the Head Start classroom that are funded through district grants and attached to
Yes.
those grants.
So that's how that works. So here's the good news, we have hit stability. So the drop has happened, it's now in all buildings, and enrollment is stabilized with most classes in the mid-60s, and that's where we anticipate we will be.
What did you say when we were at the end of June?
941. We're at 934 now.
I have a question. On day one, we had 923 students. Now we have 934 students. Where did those extra 11 students
Well,
go?
they move into the district. During the
Really?
first week of school, it is not uncommon that there is a lot of transition and movements into the district.
Just parenthetically, I was just wondering, how many students, just roughly, move in and out in the course of the school year? Just again,
I didn't even ask him to ask that question.
Just to get, I couldn't answer the whole year, but I could give you just an update. I ran the Traversa report, which is the school transportation report, the second week of August. And I think it was 904 students. And when I ran it on Monday, it was 939 or 941 students, whatever the case may be. So in that time period, there was a net gain of 30 some odd students. And that could be late kindergarten registration, it could be students coming in, moving out, et cetera, et cetera. But in that 1 month time period, less than 1 month time period, we gained 30 some odd students. And this week alone, we lost, the middle
We
school
had-
lost a family with a couple students who went to another district, so I think there's.
That was
an
new
element
to us and then has already left. So that's,
I guess one of my questions about that is, when you look at rents in our area, it's $600 to $800 a month for an apartment. That's a lot. And I'm just wondering, is the, I forget the name of it now, the group that's gonna reach out to the families?
I'm sorry.
Do they help with questions of that kind, where people are having a hard time coming up with the rent and so forth, or?
No, there's a lot of reasons behind it that I think we have a good, fairly decent understanding. some of it is rent, some of it is, jobs, some of it is families with kids and so on. But have we done a set? We haven't, but I think that's something that would, not just with the home run person, but with Mrs. Hodges, could help us get that information.
Because talk about things that will really destroy a kid's ability to progress and to thrive, moving from district to district is a big thing, obviously. I think it would be really helpful over the course of time to kind of find out why families are moving in and out, and to see if there's anything that we could be doing more to help stabilize that situation for the benefit of the kids, at least primarily.
I think one of the big things is the homework program, again, once that gets started, or still waiting on the county for that, is feeling comfortable here. It's, the support that they're receiving. We've had families, we had one family that moved in and out, has moved in and out of districts all over, each of them goes into probably beyond that, and we've maintained that family the longest in some of those connections with people and social emotional supports for not only his children but for the family. It is really important.
Because one of the things that I'm thinking is that if there's some issues that are common to a number of families, maybe we could be doing advocacy as well as just helping the kids in school.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're hoping with the homework program that will give us a better understanding of things where they're moving.
Well, if that could be shared with us.
Absolutely.
It would also be helpful to know why we're moving in. If there's a reason, like an out-of-district student is coming here, is it because of our math program, or our music program, or art program?
With our wonderful school board.
Or our wonderful school board?
That is the first box that they check when he has gone. It's usually the school board.
No, but we've had conversations,
It's not about.
because of the programs that we have here, some people come in from out-of-district for that.
I will, yes, in some regards. So, the nature of many families that I'm working with, your events, and I will tell you that we are a community that you can walk. So you can get to, it's not ideal, but you can get to Stewart's Big Lots within, it's walking. Versus other communities, exactly.
Yeah.
Versus other communities like we live in Fonda, there isn't much within walking distance, and, that's a dramatic shift. With Fort Plain, where there is so much of them, you can get to most places without having to use a vehicle.
Right.
So,
Good point, thank you.
I had one question on this. If we could be reminded how the non-resident aid works, and because we're not collecting taxes, right? Because they're non-residents, so how does that, I just wanted to be reminded how that whole thing works.
So when we are counting students on beds day, we count those students as part of our aggregate attendance, and that aggregate attendance helps drive our aid.
But aid isn't dollar for dollar always, right? So
Dollar for dollar compared to.
cost, because
No,
tax
they-
pays for
right,
some of it.
Right,
So
correct. Yeah, it's
So
not dollar for
what-
dollar.
what do those non-residents actually cost the district? Is it 20% on average? As I went through these numbers, that just popped into my head.
Yeah, that's
It's
a good
like,
question.
That's a good
geez.
question,
Yeah.
but it also matters because I wouldn't say the cost is high if they're with us on bed six. So a majority of our out-of-district, our students that are non-resident are with us on bed six, October, so they're October,
It's like,
So they're with us from the beginning of the school year on. We don't have many that are like, oh, it's April, we wanna come and join, we can come to your school. So I don't think the cost is as high as, I don't think it's high, based on that, because we have them here and they count into that number.
I
yeah,
understand
I'm
what you're
trying
saying.
to figure out, I don't even know
But there's
that
still
we can
gotta be a
calculate.
cost to it, because
Well, with-
when we look at the overall budget,
Yeah.
taxes is only a certain portion of the
Yeah,
budget, or
right.
taxes are a certain portion of the budget, and aid is another portion of the
So,
budget.
right, so it would be our per
So
pupil
the aid is
expenditure.
what's, we're getting the aid for them,
Versus
but
the-
we're not getting the taxes for them.
Right, so if we took our per pupil expenditure and we looked at it versus our per pupil aid factor, do we get a per pupil aid factor? Is that Taupo? It's called TAP, it's great. So there, we could dig into
If
that
you
and
could just
find
let
that,
us
yeah,
know
that's an
that, it was
interesting
something that,
question, yeah.
this just popped up, because, 50 out of less than 1,000, now we're getting to be percentage points, right?
It's potentially a whole class.
Right, exactly.
When you're
It's
talking
darn
about class
close.
sizes
Yeah,
in
it's
the
darn
mid-60s,
close.
yeah. So I think that's what we would have to look at. There's an average per pupil expenditure that the district has, but then we'll have to find it, the average per pupil aid. Then that would be the comparison,
Right.
that we could have hard numbers on. The rest of it's just really conjecture.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's a great question, right? Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, there's the per pupil expenditure on the school report, it's that attached to or something on the SD3.
Any other questions on the numbers?
I got it.
That went far. Okay.
Sorry.
No, I was part of it, so I can't complain.
All right.
Okay, so then there was discussion about the first day activity.
Yes, so.
I'll
building-
start with our littlest people. Our first week was smooth, and Mrs. Tower, Andrea Tower, district president, is our first grade teacher. And first grade teacher, I told her tonight, it's like she's been with us for years. She's a 14-year teacher, so that's certainly someone that jumps right in. And Mrs. Stuttle, Pat Stuttle, is Mrs. Miller's maternity leave, another wonderful addition to our family. Our AIS teachers, in fact, we have 3 this year, is fantastic. And we had a wonderful moment. I want to share because you know how hard we've been working on our reading goals. So we use the parameters that the Wonders set out because Mrs. Sullivan is using the Wonder Works, which you have to be at a certain letter, the F and P, A, B, C, where they are, and then you have to score a certain score on the placement and diagnostic test that the Wonders gives us. And in first grade, we only had 1 child who technically qualified. And so that was so exciting because we know how hard we work with kindergarten literacy and how hard kindergarten works. What we did was that we know about 20 weeks into first grade, they hit a wall when they get to the vowel blends and some of the difficult consonant teams. And so we took those cuspers and we put them in the old booster. So that hopefully, last year we saw kind of a large group that needed AIS 20 weeks in, so we want to prevent that, and we're going to watch it closely, so I can update you on that first grade. But that was fantastic, and those AIS ladies are amazing. This year we have 8 full-day classroom aides. We have 3 in kindergarten, 2 in pre-K, we have a one-on-one, we have 1 in the pool, and 1 in Miss Holtz. Now, long ago, when there weren't full-time aides or when they were part-time positions, we always used to bump up. And so bumping up was certainly something that we were accustomed to. However, it made more children not with their person who knows them with their recess routine, with their lunch routine. So what we did was we took those 9 full-time aides and put them through the HFMOC sub-service, which we already use with our teachers and our nurse sometimes. And it actually worked well because the kindergarten aide that you appointed last meeting, she had to give notice to Fulmont, and so she was not here with us the first 6 days, and we had the same aide, a lovely woman from Palatine Bridge. So we also got to meet someone new from the community. Teachers and students had suggested doing something fun on Friday. It wasn't originally planned, and the kids had said because it was so hot we needed popsicles, and then one of my teachers had said we should all gather. We didn't want to take away the thunder from CDAT because they have our big school family assembly planned for the end of the month, but pre-K through 5 went to the lawn. Everyone had a popsicle, and I was on the roof with, I think, 6 other teachers. Kids loved it, being on the roof, But we introduced all the adults because we want every child to know who their safekeepers are. That will text nicely to the mental health curriculum we'll talk about in a minute. And we just were able to celebrate because the adults worked so hard. So we clapped, we celebrated the grade levels, and then it was Mrs. Hodges' birthday, so the entire school sang to Mrs. Hodges. So she liked that. Some areas of consideration, and Mrs. Grimshaw and I spoke about this, the hot days were super hot. We have the old north wing, that 2nd floor, 4th grade. We do have 7 classrooms up there without the air conditioning. Got up to 87.5, and the next day started at 84. So I know NICET is doing some legislation about some policy should be set for procedures and whatever guidance we give, and we talk about it when we're rotating through the great room. There's a lot of babies to rotate through the great room or disrupt or come to the high school, so something to think about in that respect. And also, this is the first time we have had full day pre-K, our pre-K 4 in September. Because remember, we went to full day, well, no, we had it last.
We
We
had
had-
it.
no, but we didn't have transportation, I'm so
We didn't have
sorry. We didn't have transportation until later. And so what we did was, this is the first time we're having a bit of a ping pong with Head Start with our friends at Beaumont. So we're gonna have to sit down with them and maybe come up with different procedures so that we gained 2, we lost 1, and we wanna make it more smooth for the families, and we wanna make sure that we are all cohesive with Beaumont. We don't wanna, some families the transportation works better for, and so we're happy to have them. Sometimes the supports of Head Start is a better fit for another family. So that's a little bump that we're gonna work on and make sure that Beaumont has been an incredible partner to us, and we wanna continue that relationship and less confusion. So.
All right, so opening day in the middle school went, knock on wood, went fantastic. We followed the model that the middle school 2.0 team came up with last year. So in the morning, we did station rotations. There were 12 rotations throughout the building, really setting kind of the expectations for expectations in the schools, procedures that that students are going to follow, and then also steps for success. What's going to help make them be a successful middle school students. So the whole morning, students rotated in basically in their home-based groups. We actually switched it up a little bit this year, kept them in grade level specific groups, because the way we would present that information to an incoming 6th grader might be a little bit different than reinforcing an expectation that an 8th grader would have. So they tracked through, worked with teams of 2 to 3 teachers in most of the groups. That broke at about 11 o'clock, and then students and teachers actually got lunch and went out and spent about 45 minutes outside trying to stay out of the heat as best as possible. We went up top, and a lot of students kind of hung out in the shade, but you had your troopers playing, foursquare on the basketball courts and running around playing soccer and kickball and things like that. The heat did, not so much the first day. No, not so much the first day, I think because it was all so new and there was so much going on. The second day, I didn't mean that, I meant the heat taking toll. The second day, really, I think students in that, full day rotation of classes felt the heat weigh on them a little bit more, so there was the same heat concerns at the middle school. We only have, really, the office has air conditioning, the tech room, the innovation space is supposed to because of the heat stack, but I think that the amount of, or the computer stack, the amount of heat that puts off versus the air conditioning in there, I think they battle constantly and it never gets very cool, so the heat was a concern. The afternoon of that first day, students actually rotate through their normal schedule of classes. They have mini classes, so it gives students a chance to rotate through that 9-8 period, because we don't do lunch again, of course. Rotation, they get to meet their teachers and have a little bit of a kind of a crash course of what to expect in each of the classes. Overall, I think there's a real positive buzz. The 6th graders assimilated in real nice, the incoming 6th graders. They're, one of the station rotations is myself and the new library media specialist, Mrs. Goldman, took the opportunity to kind of talk to kids about the incoming one-to-one initiative. There's definitely a lot of excitement in the middle school geared around that. And our new library media person seems very excited about embracing that, and she already has some great ideas for implementation, and is trying to really turn our middle school library into more of like this embracive tech cafe, and the vision she has for it is pretty cool. The only other thing that came out of it is as we went through scheduling at the end of the summer and as students started through, we did notice that there are some gaps in student schedules, just in terms of if students don't maximize the ensemble offerings that they have, they don't have like other choices. So just for example, a 6th grade student takes their 4 core classes, a STEM class, their rotational, which is our art, VAX, I can't remember off the top of my head. Library and art. I think I said art already, but that's close enough. Which makes up 1 period of their day. Half a credit of PE, a quarter credit of health. So they take 6 3/4 credits essentially. If we have a student that maximizes their ensembles, they're actually more than full, so we cut back half of their step. But if a student doesn't maximize that, they essentially have a full period plus a quarter of a year in study hall, or guided study. Some of those students we can hopefully maximize that time with treating that as a guided study to provide true remediation. But those students who are, academically successful, it's just empty time in their day. So I've already talked to a couple teachers. It's going to be brought to all teachers at the next faculty meeting about thinking about ideas that we can offer students in terms of electives for teachers who might be interested to bring, to teach a 6th class and bring a different rotating elective to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 6th and 8th definitely have the most flexibility. 7th grade, there's a different health requirement, so their schedule's a little bit tighter. But, students who aren't maximizing their day, what else can we bring them to help them do that?
Well, our first day, as has been the case for the last few years, was a star day, and it's always fantastic. The kids this year actually started in their star teams, got their t-shirts. There were some team activities that they did because they did mix up the teams for this year, having, as we talked about before, students who are coming and going and all those things, and trying to make sure that we have all of the grade levels represented on a team. So they did some team building activities in the classroom before we came together for our assembly. And I have to say, it's always one of my favorite because everybody has their t-shirt, everybody sits by their team. So when you look across, it's just one color after another. And really over the last couple of years, I would say the committee of students who are actively involved and do the announcements related to the activity, and they explain the theme to the kids, are really great because they're the ones up front leading the show. And I said, for me anyway, one of the things that appeared really different this year was the fact that our seniors were so genuinely excited to participate in every activity they could get their hands on, because this is what they know. Every year they've been in high school, this is their opening day. When I first got here, it was the seniors who were like sitting in the, like, I'm too cool for this, like, this is because it was newer for them. And these guys have lived it all the way through, so the seniors are really living by example. They get out there, they get the other kids out there, let's go, we're gonna have fun. And so our theme this year is about change. Issue plus gift equals change. Use what you have and can offer to the universe to make positive change. And so they played Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror about look at yourself and make the change you want to see. And they played it, and at first some people were like, oh, the kids are everybody was clapping. Thanks to Mr. Smith, he started it. Everyone was clapping, the kids were standing up. I took a video of it. It is seriously one of the best moments when we start the year with that idea. And the kids were up and singing, and all the teams were clapping, and it was really great, and they watched it great. I tried to share it in the board notes, I'm not sure how it worked out. The link for video they showed about a little girl, I think she was probably 11 or 12, her name is Hannah. It was a TED Talk where she says, everybody will tell you you're too young, but you're never too young. Even if you do one thing for one person, you've impacted that person, you've made a positive change. And so it was a really great message, I think, and they have activities, obviously lined up through the year, but it's always such a great way to start the day. And we too, everybody has lunch at the same time, and there were kids out on the lawn, and there were kids out on the tables, and kids in the atrium, and a lot of people in the cafeteria, and everybody just has lunch together, and then they go on and make activity, do all their competitions, and it's great excitement to find out who wins at the end. And of course, we always end with our lip sync, which is just, hysterical. Because the kids get so into it and they do a really great job. And again, I think one of the differences is that now every grade level is participating in almost every activity. Those seniors are up there, like, leading the charge. So it's really exciting. And again, that theme will just carry us through the year. And I'm excited because I think a lot of people have really great ideas for things that we can do, whether in our community or even for themselves. Making those goals to, I'm going to change something personally for myself that could help me be better. So, it was great time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anything else from day one, or are we done?
We're done.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda, just one thing I wanted to mention, which I forgot, we're doing the super stuff before we go on to approvals. This is the old brochure that we use when we were including Mrs. Grimshaw in that round. This is not necessarily what we're going to use now, but it's one template. Mr. Rose is going to get some other templates for us, but look at it and for the next meeting, and you'll see what kinds of things you might like to see different, or add, subtract, or whatever, so that you can get moving. Okay, next thing is approvals. Minutes. First of all, could we do a consent agenda on this?
No. That was-
Ah, okay. All right, so we'll start with minutes. Do I have a motion? Okay, any questions on minutes or comments?
I have a general. I don't know when to ask this question, so I'm just gonna ask it. If we have a question about something that happened on at a previous board meeting, can we ask that and when we're going over the minutes, or should we ask that when we're in old business, even though it's not on there, but it's a question, but, you know, it was something that came up in the minutes, and I wanna just follow up on it.
That should be old business, 'cause it's
Okay.
not these minutes.
That's fine, that's fine.
Or is it a change in any of these
Well,
minutes?
it pertains to one of the minutes,
Oh,
that's
if
why.
there's
I
a
was
change
asking.
or something.
It wasn't a change, it was just a question as to, like, for example, I'll just go to old business on August 9th. If you look at fitness center, it says Mrs. Grimshaw had a brief conversation with Mr. Dunn to gain more information about team needs. A meeting with Ms. Hayes is being scheduled, so I was just asking if we had that meeting and if there was a follow-up from that. I didn't know if this was the time to ask it, or if I should do that in old business. You see what I'm saying?
I think that would be more old business if it's a discussion rather than just
Right,
question the
Right,
minutes.
right, I'm not questioning the minutes, so that's what I'm
Say old
asking.
business.
Okay, thank you.
So any issues with the 9th or the 28th?
The 28th wasn't posted.
This is true.
It wasn't.
So we
No.
can't vote on that.
Okay, so, I'll ask for a motion on the minutes from the 9th.
Motion to accept.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
Okay, the bills. Any questions? Or comments? Oh, sorry, motion?
Make a motion.
Second.
Now, any questions or comments?
What, I'm just curious as to what it is, if it's like the 55664, the School Administrators Association of New York, is that a conference?
Those are dues.
Dues, oh, okay.
Anything else?
A7, on the A7 report, Eleanor Davis, it was just a lot of money made out of the name that I didn't recognize.
Yep. That's who we used to fix the Nellis roof that was damaged over a year ago.
Right, I remember
Yeah,
that, so
I got
that's
fixed.
fixed now? And Nickerson Corp., again, it was just a new name I didn't recognize.
We've used them for a while. Where do you see that?
That was on A7 too.
Yeah.
What do we use?
That
them
was for, 6th grade bathroom, fixtures.
So they do plumbing and
Yeah.
stuff? Advanced Comfort was another weird one I didn't recognize.
Yeah, we use them for AC and.
Right. The Rust Cotton Shop,
Yeah, I was wondering.
that was a unique name. I'm getting creative.
That's
I
something that has
like
to do
the
with
exhibit.
transportation.
They do the underbuses.
Oh, the undercoating, is that
Yeah,
what it
the
is?
undercoating,
Okay.
yes.
Now
I
that
pass
makes
it,
sense.
it's over on my family. It's in Dallas. I know, right where it is.
And then I just wondered what we're paying the Village of Canfield for.
That's the water sewer.
Okay.
What was that for?
Water bill?
Oh,
I just had one, the Utica National Insurance Group, what is they already insured?
Yep, that's our, building insurance, vehicle insurance.
Also, it's all-
Yeah, that's the one-time payment. for the whole
So it's
year.
a whole annual cost?
Yeah.
Just, thank you. Anything else on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, moving right along to treasurer's report. Any questions or comments there?
Motion.
Oh, sorry.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
I only have one question, and that was just to follow up on our status. We said we were gonna review different interest rate investment options, and I just wanted to know what's our status on scheduling that?
Perhaps before we leave this evening, we could schedule a finance committee meeting. Let's do that while we're all together. That might make it easier than the going back and forth. We'll play calendar pool while we're all in the same room.
Okay, that was my question as well, so I'll spare you any math tonight. Anything else on treasurer's report? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, transportation contracts, do I have a motion?
Matt motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that?
Yes.
All right.
It's under, I just need it explained to me,
Oh, wait a minute.
that we're paying $396 a day for 1 month.
The other one is business.
Is that correct?
Which one are you, the P-TECH one? Which,
That's the only contract that
There's
was
only
in.
one.
No,
for-
there's
There's one under
There's two.
executive
One under
session.
executive.
Okay, I'm
Oh.
looking at the one that's not executive.
That's not, okay, so, yes, this is part of, if you all recall, we are the fiscal LEA for the P-TECH 3 grant for Ag P-TECH. So this year, which means we handle all of their finances. And the way the grant works, there's a certain percentage of the money that the district has to account for and work directly with. So this year is the 3rd year of Ag P-TECH. Some of the students are now going to SUNY Cobleskill. We needed to provide transportation for students on the eastern part of our BOCES to get to SUNY Cobleskill. We are going to be contracting 3 days a week for 31 weeks with Browns. This doesn't cost the district anything. This comes out of the Ag P-TECH 3 grant. So it's the per day cost for 3 days a week for 31 weeks. So it runs the 2 semesters of SUNY Cobleskill.
And this is coming out of a grant.
Yes, it comes out of the P-TECH 3 grant, which is written and held by HFM BOCES. The fiscal end of it is administered by us.
So can I have a follow-up question then on that? This contract reads as though it's only for a month.
Well, it is. This is the first to get us started because now we have to go out and bid the transportation contract. So we were able to get them for the first month of school, so that, because their classes started before ours did.
Oh, gotcha.
Because
No,
their
no,
classes started
I'm
August
with you.
27th, as
Yeah.
I'm sure you know because you did that.
I'm with you now.
Yeah, so that's why this is just for the month, but the full contract that's going out to bid will be for the remainder of the 2 semesters. Still same cost.
Can I ask another question? So I looked at the total, so this is $36,800 plus for a month of 3 days a week.
And that's
No,
the
that's
year.
the full year.
Okay, but that isn't the way this reads. This reads August 27th to
This is
September
annual cost.
26th.
But
Total
anticipated
anticipated
annual cost, it's
That's
not
why,
the-
how we have to do that.
You have
for
to do
the-
it that way?
Is it $396 a day
Yes.
for the month?
No, it's $396 a day. We are contracting with them for this first part. This is how state ed told us to do it. from August to September. Then when we get the final bid for the contract, it'll still be the same thing, but the total anticipated cost, including this month, is the $36,828. So,
Math wasn't working for me, that's what the problem
Okay, so
is.
if it's
okay, but we
Well,
have, I didn't bring the math
No,
with me,
no, I'm
but
sorry.
it's okay.
It's Mr. Ferguson, it's $396 a day, 3 days a week, 31 weeks, and that comes out to $36,828.
So $396 for 3 days a week, they're there Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 31 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this contract?
Paid for by the grant, no district funds involved.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Next, we have transportation request. Do I have a motion?
I'll second.
Okay, any questions or discussion?
I've got a couple questions. They're just asking to use our buses? Do they know that there's a cost associated with that?
Their contractor backed out, and so they contacted us to see if we would be able to help them. They will pay the per mileage $20.90 charge plus the driver cost for Saturday and Sunday, and they know what those costs are.
Yeah.
We have drivers and we have buses available.
Didn't they go to Sharon?
They did.
Well, I mean, they're gonna
Period.
pay mileage from here to Sharon.
They're
for
fine.
2 days.
They're fine. They're fine.
So Sharon said no. Evidently.
There's other stuff there, but yes, they said no. But I think it's great that we're helping them out, so I think it's good.
I would think it's great too. It's great PR. Canajoharie School.
Absolutely.
I don't know how many people are there.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer to me.
It really is, I think it's good that we're doing it, so.
That covers all of our costs, right?
They will cover 100% of the cost, yes. They pay for the whole thing.
I just wanted to make sure they're great that we're charging. So all the costs.
Yes,
Yeah,
that,
I
you
got you. That's
approved
what I
that,
was-
you approved that rate upon,
Yeah.
but Mr. Convier's recommendation in July.
Okay.
Yes, but they will pay the salary plus the per mileage cost, which includes wear and tear on the bus, the gas, all of that good stuff. So it was a little bit of a, can you please help us out? We thought that the timing worked out so that per the board policy, it could come to you for your approval, and I certainly think it's a good thing to do if we can help. If we can help out, we should.
Yeah.
I was really surprised this was the foundation, because it's a Sharon Springs event, not a foundation event. So I found it interesting.
It's actually not. It's actually a foundation.
Really? Because the chamber there is.
No, in the past, it's been a chamber. In the
Okay,
past, it's
chamber.
been a chamber, this year it is not a chamber event.
Okay, now it makes sense.
Yep.
Perfect.
Well, no, it's just, I know because I've been in contact with Heidi. And so it's not a chamber event, it's a Beekman event this year, which is the first time.
Yeah, because
In the
always, in
past,
the
it's
past,
always
it's been a
been-
chamber event, and I know that from my chamber activities.
Right.
At any rate, I just want to apologize that it came on the agenda at the last minute,
Okay.
but
But
the
the
request came at the last
It's,
minute.
we're helping, I saw Heidi yesterday.
I'm fine, I'm clear now.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, no other questions.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, next is the mental health curriculum. Can I have a motion?
I'll second it.
Who's first? Cheryl.
Okay.
All right, so this is the mental health education instruction that came down on July 1st of this year. We took the summer to really dissect it, pull it apart, see what we have in place already in our curriculums, and then what needed to be added. So just to give you some background, it's treated differently at the elementary versus the secondary level. Okay, so the elementary level, this will be taught by the general education teachers. At the secondary level, it's taught in health classes, and there's different requirements I have there for you that indicates how much time in the health classes they are provided at the middle versus the high school. So There are 4 main components of the mental health curriculum, and that is understanding how to obtain and maintain good mental health, decreasing stigma related to mental health, enhancing help-seeking efficacy, so know where to go, how to get the support, and so on, and understanding mental disorders. So to give you
Understanding
mental disorders. So, you know, it's creating empathy from it. So what we did, and I say we, because I'm talking about health teachers, I'm talking about Mrs. Nair and building principals, we took what we are doing right now and we filled in the holes. And you'll see that in this document to you. And on the document I handed out was bright red, but Mrs. Goodchild filled it up. That was not as lovely, so it's in bold. So at the elementary level, a lot of this is already taught through the rituals of
You have a handout of how it correlates.
well, my goodness, what are we gonna pass it out? You are so sick and it's working for you.
We're gonna keep you medicated.
Really, what we're doing is a lot of.
She's part of the deep state.
Oh my God.
It is part of the conscious discipline and the rituals that are part of the classroom already. We hit on all of these. Michelle went through every single one and was like, yep, we got it, yep, we got it. So that was really exciting. It really shows that we're hitting all the top, most important things with our conscious discipline. And New York State has identified that too, which may be concerning. But anyway, so the middle school and the high school health curriculums is something where we really had to bolster and provide more of the mental health supports and add those things into the curriculums. So we took the basic curriculum for health, and then we said, okay, this is what's being taught, this is what needs to be taught. So what needs to be taught is in your bold. So our health teachers don't necessarily have the mental health background that to help them facilitate and give this information. So there's going to be a partnership with our counseling staff, our PPS team, to make sure that they are helping provide some of that information about where to get support, how to seek support, having those conversations about mental illness and how to be empathetic to those. So it's kind of a dual role. Yes, these are health teachers at secondary level, but we really are incorporating our PPS team into those discussions. So we'll continue to fine tune this as we go. But the overarches, we were hitting all the main components with this curriculum.
Is this the first year that it's being implemented?
July 1 is when it started.
Any other questions?
I only have one. It looked like it started in each school at the year they're in. So is there any requirements for like a senior this year to go back and do something or no?
No,
Okay.
there isn't, unfortunately. I will say that some of the things that we're doing elicit that, so another component of this is your building-wide programs. So if we're looking at the restorative justice that you brought down, that is, those components are within, are going to hit on that, the conscious discipline. So you're also looking at how is the building level dealing with that, how is your staff handling that with the school culture?
So the real reason I asked is the awareness piece, right? Because particularly with teenagers and the older teenagers is where that tends to show up a lot.
Absolutely.
So our upperclassmen are really getting missed out on this, so I was wondering if we had any
How can we
plan to
incorporate
address that.
I think that's fantastic, and when you're bringing it back to the team as a whole, so we can come up with a plan. I like that. Because we typically do health and right now. If we attempt tonight.
Well, 9th is when they do their freshman health seminar, which actually Tammy started going
Yep,
into
she's
last
already
year
doing
and already
And she's already
doing some
doing it.
activities. Tammy Wood is one of our counselors. And so that already happens, but we have worked really hard actually to get most of our students health in 10th grade so that we're not struggling to fit it in their senior year. So it's mostly 10th and 11th graders right now. Mostly 10th graders, a few 11th graders right now. And health.
Okay, so our seniors and some 11th graders that will miss this. I was just concerned about the mental health awareness piece.
Absolutely, and we were touching on that at the end of the day today, with some
supervise periodically to like make sure that the mental health curriculum is being taken seriously, because it's not usually.
It probably hasn't been in the past, I can't speak to it, okay? But this new, these are mandates, and we have gone through this with the health teachers. Okay, so, yes, and you get the added bonus of PPS members that will be helping with that as well.
So it's a brand new curriculum.
Yeah, yeah. So you're right, there were components of mental health, and when we broke down all of the curriculum, there were, lots of fun textbooks. There were components, but not to this level.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the teachers take it as seriously as they should.
Yeah.
Anything else? I have something, I didn't see it, I actually read through it all. And, but I didn't really see, and maybe this is getting into more of the details of the curriculum, but I didn't see anything about, anything about sexual or racial or gender orientation or sex education
That
things
would-
in there, and I hate to see them lost going over to just a kind of broad-based mental health.
Those components, from what my understanding is, are incorporated. In terms of this just being focused on the mental health, you're absolutely right, there's clear, clear ties between the two. But they don't mandate and indicate that those need to be covered. I can follow up with the health teachers and ask how those are addressed.
I'd like to hear about
Let's do
When I took health, it was still Mrs. Farkas, but she's not here anymore. But she went very deep into all of that, like sexual orientation, all of it, and bullying, and like she was very gung-ho about it all. So I'm not sure. I haven't taken it with the new teachers, but I know that
that was incorporated.
It is part of the curriculum, how individual teachers present it, I
Yeah.
think is different, potentially different.
I'd just like to,
Absolutely.
anything else? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstained? All right. Thank you. Yes. And administrators.
And health teachers,
healthcare.
I mean, and
Health teachers.
all the above.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so, Central Association for Blind and Visually Impaired Agreement for Services, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second? Okay,
This is a repeat service. We had it last year, I believe we started the year before, the partial year. A student, they get mobility services. Essentially, they're helping students that are losing vision get around. So using cane, figuring out space when they lose their eyesight.
any questions?
We have a motion, I'm sorry.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I made it.
Thank you.
Okay, so, no other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Next, we have capital project bond resolution. We discussed the bond earlier, do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second. Any further questions? All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Okay, surplus items, do I have a motion? Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? HFM BOCES substitute list, I couldn't tell if there's anything new
Yeah,
on there.
that's
This
one
was,
I just-
they have a new system, so I printed everything out. So the moving forward, we'll get new people that gets added, by dates, by each month. All right, so.
Okay, so, I guess,
I have a question
Yeah,
about
right.
substitute list, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but everybody who's on the list has to be fingerprinted, right?
Yes.
Through both.
Okay, through
Yes.
BOCES.
Yep, I just thought,
Yeah, they maintain the list and all the credentials.
just double check.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Okay. Before we go to old business, there's just one other thing on the brochure that I wanted to mention, which is thank you to Mrs. Grimshaw and Mrs. Van Dusen for finding Jonathan. So, thank you.
Actually, you could thank Sarah Wheeler, our new communications specialist, she doubled down.
Okay, well, thank you for all right, so old business, we have middle school teacher aid Title I.
Me? Okay, thanks.
That's you, Chris.
So I already somewhat touched upon it. Essentially, throughout 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we have a gap in student schedules depending on their choice to elect to be in certain classes, ensemble-based classes. That leaves some students, most students I would say, with a gap in their schedule of some sort that is a directed study or guided study. My scheduling goal was to use existing staff personnel to man or woman those classes to provide that guided study. It's just as our staff has shrunk throughout the years, the number of full-time people I have in my building that have a duty, it's not possible. So the majority of that day, right now, I have students who need somebody. In that group of students, it's a combination of students who could definitely benefit from, guided remediation. And then there's also students who we have to be more flexible with that are succeeding in classes, but just don't have a full course load and have a study hall, so to speak. To make this successful, grade level teams will be sharing lists of students who owe work. So if a student owes multiple assignments on a daily basis, those teachers synthesize these lists together and they are shared out with the grade level teams. They would be shared out with this remediation aid. Also, students who are failing one or more subjects every 5 weeks would be targeted by this person as well, if they are in these classes. Now, there are students who academically might be on that borderline that would succeed, find success in a class like this, but a schedule would not allow for it. So it would really be used to target our students who do not have full schedules, that academically could use that extra support. That time's already built into their day, but we don't have a person per se to maximize that time due to other duties and future requirements.
So I think the first question we had last board meeting, which is what brought this back to the agenda, was how is this a full-time job versus a part-time job? And then the second was geared towards the grant monies that we had in the past and the efforts that we had tried, and it wasn't really successful, so how could we maybe tie this to the grant monies and try to meet those objectives? And from what you've described, that sounds like it would be geared towards those objectives, so I think we need to get those connected a little bit, is what we were struggling with at our last meeting.
Right now, there are 6 periods in a 9-period day that are completely not partnered with anybody in that directed study or guided study.
I don't know what you mean by that.
So in terms of a full-time versus a part-time position, 6 of the 9 periods, I have students in the guided study area where I don't have a supervising adult.
Okay, so you need to cover at least 6 periods.
At least 6. One of them would be a lunch. The other 2 periods, we would utilize that person to add extra support and academic support, help with pulling students out for testing, remediation, things like that. So it would be a full 750 to 250, I believe is the time frame schedule, but they would be used mainly in that guided study. They would have a lunch. They would also utilize that person during the lunch block hour to support the Study Then initiative, where we bring those students in who need extra support during that lunchtime.
So that's a whole bunch of different skill sets in what you just named. I think to get at the aid that's available to us, right, the grant
Right,
that's
so,
available to
right,
us.
we would have to tie it to one of the objectives.
Right,
In this case, the objective would be the reduction of course failures.
And didn't we need that person would then have to bring certain skills to that job?
So we looked at the secondary job description that, for the high school aide, and we had revamped that prior, because now it's a similar position. So I shared that with Chris as a similar job description for the middle school.
Okay, so do we think this, if we went full-time, would it be grant eligible?
Yes.
And what percentage of the cost of a fully loaded person is gonna be covered by the grant?
100.
100.
Mhm.
And is that a year-to-year
Yes.
grant renewal?
Yes, well, it's a year-to-year grant. Yes, we get the grant every year.
But it could be stopped after a year, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because one of the things we would have to show this year, that this is the link back to the ESSA grant and the objectives, is these efforts would have to show a reduction in course failures. So there's a direct link between the expenditure and what we hope the outcomes to be.
So just to play devil's advocate,
Mhm.
I hope this would not be what plays out, but just to play devil's advocate, we go with it, it's grant eligible this year, it's a full-time position, we're getting reimbursed 100%, and next year we don't get the money.
Well, but I think Chris was talking about trying to come up with some more electives and so forth. Which might alleviate that problem with teachers teaching the sixth period.
My goal is this is a one-year position, because I would like to fill those schedules to where students who need academic, remediation through AIS, or students that need their, resource room as allotted by their IEP, they would have that support. But we just have a lot of students who don't maximize their potential through 8 periods of teaching, because we don't have anything to offer them. So I'm hoping that those gaps right now that we are treating, that become these guided studies, I'm hoping that we can eliminate the vast majority of it by offering them something else through teachers willing to teach other classes.
But you still have the percentage of students available that are needing help.
We
And
can
that isn't gonna be addressed by that.
We can still provide that during the study then hour, during that hour lunch rotation. It's not their whole lunch, but after lunch, we have some time for that.
I'm sorry, I might be misunderstanding, but
No,
I
you're
think
not.
there's a fine point in being eligible for this grant in terms of what we do with that targeted time. And last year, it was questionable, I think, is the determination we came to, of whether we were successful in meeting the requirements of the grant with what we were actually doing.
Right, so that's why we were trying to rewrite the job description and rewrite it. The needs of the kids aren't going to go away. What the companion part to what Mr. DiPaolo is saying is that if it's not a structured guided studies because there's other opportunities within the schedule, there would still need to be an accompanying different plan for remediation for those students who this year we might be able to capture through a targeted direct
Next year, that might
assistance.
be a different resource, is that what you're thinking?
It would have to be a different model.
Well,
Because we would still have students who have academic needs.
we'd have to capture them differently, because right now, we have students who don't necessarily have academic needs combined with students who
No,
do have
I got
academic
that, I got that part,
Right,
and
yeah.
that's what Mark was saying, I understand that piece. I just wanna make sure that we don't create this full-time position and fall into the same situation we did last year, where we didn't really address the outcomes that we needed,
Well,
right?
right, and this year, last year, this outcome was not part of the grant, the reduction of course failures. This year, the objective has to be in there, and we had to list the measures. So we have to go back in June and say, how did we do?
Okay.
And if we do not meet what we said we were going to meet, then we would look at that and say, okay, that expenditure needs to look different. We would actually have that data, we track that quarterly. So we're going to have that as we go along. Maybe it looks different next year in terms of a structure, because we're always going to have students who are going to have academic needs. It would just have to be built into the schedule along with perhaps some other electives. That's how I would see it
So
playing out.
then my last question would be, how do we structure this position so we don't wind up in trouble at the end of next year, having a full-time loaded head count when the position might disappear?
Meet the objective. I mean, really, that's what you have to do, yeah.
But we might need to shift to a different model, which might mean it's somebody different.
Correct. You
So
might-
I don't wanna get, I don't wanna position us for
Yeah,
a problem next year. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
right, right.
Do you follow what I'm saying?
I do,
Go through.
I'm just trying to work through it, yeah.
I'm not opposed to the idea at all, I'm just trying to think, okay, what happens at the end of June, right? If we need a different model, it might not be the same person, but we've added a full loaded line.
Well, the way we do that is we do like we did last year, which means you make it a one-year appointment. These are one-year appointments.
Okay.
So that's how we address that. Because the other piece is the ESSA funding looks good now.
Right.
I think there's enough volatility at the federal level that we don't know what that would always look like moving into the future. So there's a whole lot of other factors. So in this case, you look at it for the year, the objective, and you make it a one-year position.
So is this for us to
That's-
request?
That's grant funded.
Is this an item of business for us to act on? Or no?
Yeah, we have to act on it, we didn't approve it last time.
Correct, it's in its.
Oh, okay.
Chris, you had a question first?
I got, a couple questions. As I'm understanding it, is this through Title I or is this through ESSA? So Title I, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because you can use those Title I funds for other salaries that are, you can earmark that money for other, like reading teachers or, somebody else.
And we
use
already,
it.
yes, and
All
all
right.
those are already.
So now we're drawing money from those and paying those out of a different fund stream to pay for this new position. correct?
It's in the title.
Title I
It can
grant.
be in the title, which is
All right.
ESSA, it's the same
So-
thing.
Okay, so that's one question. So we're really not gaining, we're still paying for it. It's not just grant funded, it's the way you're looking at it. But if you're paying for it as a Title I, but that means you gotta pay for another position through a different funding stream.
Position doesn't exist.
What are you using your Title I ESSA funds for?
Yeah,
That's,
So
well,
now you're redistributing your funds from
well, that
point A
was,
to point B.
no, we built it in. We have money in the Title I fund because we finished those grants after. We can always go back and change the one, but if you go back to the handout from the beginning of the meeting, for right now, we built in the high school and middle school learning support aid salaries. We just built it in. If the position isn't approved, we go back to the grant and reallocate those grant monies elsewhere.
Okay, so the next question I have is this, I get what you're saying. Have you talked to the teachers already to see if they'd be willing to do a 6?
I gauged the interest with a couple teachers, but it hasn't been brought up in open forum, and everybody needs to have
Yeah.
the ability to synthesize a class and bring it to offer.
Now, I brought this up too, and I'm just trying to, again, be devil's advocate. And just now, we've lost over, and I'm just looking at this brochure, we've lost over 100 students from several years ago. But we've gained, several more positions. Like a library media specialist, I get that, we need that. The conscious discipline person at the elementary school, I get that. 2 safety monitors, I get that. AIS at the high school, safety resource officer. These are just some of the positions that I'm aware of. We have a fiduciary responsibility to not just keep on adding staff, when our budget has gone up from 19 million to over 23 million, and our population is going down. I just think that might be a hard sell to the community, that, you're adding all these staff members with that, information. I'm bringing it up, If there is another way to do it, because we don't have more kids at the middle school, I would imagine those numbers are going down. Did we lose staff at the middle school over the past, you might not know this because you haven't been here, but have we lost staff at the middle school over the past few years? Has our staff been reduced?
I believe we took one individual and then that funded Mrs. Hardy. We came like last year.
The social studies teacher who left.
We did replace
Yes.
a social studies position in recent years. And we've tried to shift the teaching responsibilities to people who should do them. And we've tried, so facts used to be taught by one of the content area teachers, that's a BOCES teacher now, so we've cleared up that. We've only recently, well, only this year have had library K-12. So there's been holes in the middle school schedule that over time, I think folks at the middle school have really done a yeoman's job of trying to figure it out, but we weren't in compliance with the requirements. So for the middle school, some of it is helping them move into compliance requirements, because we weren't doing that. Now, some of those other things that you've talked about, right, the school safety officer,
Yeah, I mean, I
the
get it.
monitors, we've added the social worker in 7 years, in the time I've been here. That's more indicative of trying to meet the needs of our students and who our community is, whether it's even with diminished students. But I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to put it in the.
I just wanna make sure we're not gonna
Yeah.
have any repercussions.
Yeah.
We have to balance it.
I
mean,
agree.
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't wanna give you a hard time, because I totally hear what you're saying. You know, but we have to be responsible with, at some point, we have to say, how many more people are we gonna hire, and to what cost are we gonna hire these people? Or do we hire, you know, help out with special ed, or reading teachers, or, you know, I'm just speaking off the cuff, but we've got a lot more staff than we've had, which is great, but I'm just wondering at what point, what's the breaking point?
But
That's just my discussion.
I want to add to that of what
Yeah.
you're saying, because we might have this extra staff, but it sounds like we've lost teachers. And it sounds like you need teachers, because you need somebody to teach those classes, you know, so there's not those gaps in the kids' schedules, so, and you want people to teach these electives, so to me, it sounds like you need a teacher in there versus an aide to be able to teach those classes, so then people aren't teaching 6 classes if that's against their contract, then you have a teacher in there, and that just.
Well, in the last contract negotiation just completed, we agreed to pay for a 6th period, so I think it'll encourage teachers
Okay.
to, without having to hire a new teacher, to teach that 6th period, should, the idea come up for electives that they might teach.
Okay, and then my other question is, how is this position that you're doing for the aide different than an AIS teacher, or is it just an aide to watch a study hall? That's what I'm asking.
No, it's certain students in that study hall or in that guided study might be independent in terms of, they're achieving success in class, they just have a hole in their schedule. Whereas other students will be targeted, via their grades or via the owed work, my vision
So
or
you're
our
gonna
vision.
have a mixed level class?
Exactly. So some students will be more independent, where other students will be, arm to arm with that person, and that person will be assisting them, whether it's work completion or basic remediation and trying to, relearn something. I don't view it as the same thing as, an AIS teacher providing, full remediation for content, trying to catch a student up in reading level or math level, but, more helping students with work completion and things like that.
Is it also mixed grade?
With the exception of one, they are all grade level specific. There is one that has a couple 6th and 7th graders in it, but for the most part, it's grade level specific.
Anything else?
I'm not sure what we need to bring this to resolution to here. Do we need it to be a proposal or nothing?
In exec, you will have to decide whether to hire, whether to approve or not.
Okay, all right.
Is there a possibility to canvass the teachers to see if they'd be willing to teach that extra class, especially with the contract being settled?
Mr. DePaul said that he would do that at his next effect.
Yeah, so I know we have to discuss this in executive session, but
The problem with trying to add classes at this point, you'd be talking at complete schedule shakeups for 210 kids. It wouldn't be moving flipping a period.
No, I mean, you were gonna see how many teachers wanted to pick up a 6th class.
That was in planning for next year to eliminate these big gaps in some of the schedules.
To me, it sounds like you're wasting an entire year for not, or maybe a half year, maybe there's a way you can pick them up at the half year. So this way these kids are not sitting around doing,
It sounds like you need an enrichment teacher. That's what it sounds like to me. You need an enrichment teacher. To do partially, and you also need an aide partially.
Okay, anything else on that at this point? Okay. Then we move on to board goals action dashboard. This is an idea that Mrs. Grimshaw came up with, and so I will go with it.
Well, the board set goal actions, and then I was intrigued, Scott, by your comments
Right.
around a dashboard. So I am thinking about how to regularly report to the board what is going on an ongoing basis in a succinct, clear manner. This was my attempt to provide a structure for that. I had talked with Mark. Mark had indicated that perhaps monthly the board would receive an update on the activities around these board goal actions. And so my thinking, with any revisions are fine, because this has to make sense to all of you, is that you would have the goal area, you would have an update for that month of what the activities are. So every month there would be more, and that these would stack on top of each other, so that by the end of the year, you would have the entire year's worth of completion. When a goal got completed, we would write complete on it and it would be done. We would also then, I also talked with Sarah, whatever your structure is for this, we want to start pushing this out to the community, because the community should know what these things are. The community should also be updated on the accomplishment and the movement towards completion of them. So this was just my attempt at a structure. It can look however makes sense for you. I was trying to think of it as quick, succinct, and give you a monthly snapshot view.
Thank you.
Yes. The first comment is thank you very much.
Okay, any questions, comments on this?
The only comment that I would have, I like it.
Yep.
I think it would be beneficial for all of us if we actually put the objectives in each of those.
You like
we
the
see that every
objectives?
single month
Yeah,
too, of
okay.
what are we trying to accomplish.
Yep, okay. There's the objectives. We can do that. And really, this is your dashboard, so it has to work.
Anything else? Okay, before we move into exec, we'll have a motion to move into exec. I would like to ask if anyone has any questions on the CSE. There's only one thing that, because if we don't, then we can fly Jen to go home instead of letting you stay for the exec. Anyone have any questions on that? Okay, now I have a motion to go into exec.
I'll make you-
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay,
Good night, one and
just
all.
so you know, we had several meetings, and next time it's not gonna be as easy. I don't wanna get yelled at.
I was happily surprised.
Well, we've had a lot of fun events, so we've had a lot of fun meetings.
I'll-
Be ready with your reading glasses.
Okay, 5-minute break.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris?
Hey, Patty.
Chris?